Chapter 711. Kagaya's attacks continued in the direction of Naruto and Sasuke. Although Naruto and Sasuke have done their best to resist the attacks launched by Kagaya, in the face of Kagaya's almost endless waves of attacks, Naruto and Sasuke felt a little overwhelmed and shaky. At this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya's 80 Gods Hollow Strike actually doesn't have any so-called chakra nature change or form change. It's just a simple release of all the chakra in one's body from one's own body, and the faint palm shape of this move is actually because Otsutsuki Kagaya's chakra is too pure and condensed, and it's released from his own palm. Kagaya's moves were full of a sense of simplicity and power from ancient times. It was also such a fighting style that made Naruto and Sasuke, who have always paid attention to each other's consumption, sneak attacks, and other slightly sinister methods, somewhat unprepared. Originally, the battle between ninjas was like waving a sharp blade in the shadows to attack each other. Although it's not that there's no direct confrontation, even in a direct confrontation, any ninja will instinctively start to calculate how to achieve the greatest effect with the least consumption. But at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya directly used his huge power to deal a crushing blow to the enemy, like a divine weapon descending from the sky. Naruto and Sasuke have seen such an attack method on Uchiha Madara, but in such an attack method, Kagaya still has a greater advantage than Uchiha Madara. This advantage is not only from the difference in chakra reserves and physical fitness, but more importantly, it's a difference in mentality. Although Uchiha Madara once used his powerful strength to suppress the entire ninja world, after all, he was still suppressed by Senju Takuma, the first Hokage. It's not an exaggeration to say that anything Uchiha Madara does, Senju Takuma can do it, and it's even likely to do it better. Although Uchiha Madara's character is domineering and wild, there has always been someone suppressing him, which also suppressed Uchiha Madara's character to a certain extent. But Kagaya Otsutsuki is different, because Kagaya Otsutsuki himself can easily calm the raging war on the earth when he came to this world. In other words, the title of Goddess of Uno for Kagaya Otsutsuki is not just an honorific title. Kagaya Otsutsuki is a living god for the world at that time. As a true god recognized by the world, the mentality of Kagaya Otsutsuki and Uchiha Madara will naturally be very different. For Kagaya Otsutsuki, it's normal for everything in the world to submit to him. Since he's uncomfortable in his heart, he can directly show his anger and let these fools understand his horror and power. Damn it. It looks like I can't hold it anymore. The special ability of the Rikudo of the 6 paths of Rinnegan's Gekido itself is an ability to absorb the enemy's chakra into his body and use it, but the so-called absorption is not endless. The amount of chakra that can be accommodated in a person's body is actually limited. Facing the vast amount of chakra that belongs to Kagaya Otsutsuki, the amount of chakra that Sasuke can absorb at this moment has reached a limit, and even the meridians in his body have become swollen because of a large amount of chakra. From the outside, Sasuke looks extremely ferocious at this moment. Sasuke, you step back and rest for a while, I will buy you some time. Naruto has also seen that Sasuke's body has reached a limit at this moment, and immediately said to Sasuke. Sasuke and Naruto have been together for many years, and the trust between them is also beyond ordinary people. After hearing Naruto's words, Sasuke didn't say much nonsense, but directly withdrew his ability as Naruto said, and then turned directly behind Naruto. However, Sasuke didn't rest as Naruto said. Instead, he directly put his hands behind Naruto's back, and the pure chakra that he just absorbed from Kagaya's attack was also directly transferred to Naruto's body under Sasuke's control. As the first human to eat the chakra fruit, the chakra in Kagaya's body can be said to be the source of chakra in everyone's body. After the neutral and peaceful chakra was injected into Naruto's body, Naruto could clearly feel that the chakra in his body even became a lot purer because of this chakra. Naruto naturally understood Sasuke's intention to transfer such chakra into his body. Naruto immediately transferred this pure chakra directly to the 9 truth-seeking balls that were constantly rotating in front of him. The 9 truth-seeking balls swelled slightly due to the influx of a large amount of chakra. The 9 truth-seeking balls directly began to rotate at high speed under the joint energy infusion of Naruto and Sasuke, and even directly turned into the shape of a ring because of the high speed. The truth-seeking balls continued to rotate, and their size continued to increase. The ring became bigger and bigger, and it didn't take long for the ring to expand directly to the point where it almost covered the sky. The thin and large ring almost completely enveloped Kagaya's 80 Gods air attack, and the ability of the truth-seeking balls to offset energy was directly exerted to the extreme at this moment. Although Kagaya's 80 Gods air attack was very powerful, in essence, it directly crushed the enemy's attack through a large amount of chakra. Once his chakra couldn't attack the enemy or was directly offset, it was naturally meaningless. These two kids are really good, but they still chose the wrong opponent. Kagaya saw Naruto and Sasuke working together to fight against him, and even now, there was a direct tie. His eyes flashed with a trace of appreciation, but after the appreciation, he still felt a trace of anger. After all, as the goddess of Uno, he didn't allow anyone to damage his majesty. Although the cooperation between Sasuke and Naruto was quite effective, it was still slightly inferior to him. Chapter 7:12. Ha-dash! With a soft cry, Kagaya's chakra burst out again. Originally, the attack range of 80 Gods air attack was very large. With the addition of chakra, 80 Gods air attack directly burst out with more power. The truth-seeking jade rings that Naruto and Sasuke used together became quite overwhelmed at this moment. The way to neutralize ninjutsu was actually very simple in principle, that is, to release the opposite amount of chakra of the ninjutsu that you want to neutralize. However, because Otsutsuki Kagaya's chakra is neutral and peaceful, Truth-Seeking Ball can only release the same amount of chakra in order to fight against Otsutsuki Kagaya. However, the combination of Naruto and Sasuke was still different from Kagaya's, because when Naruto and Sasuke fought, they actually used chakra and six paths power with obvious limitations in their bodies. But Kagaya was different. Kagaya, who swallowed the chakra fruit, could actually be said to be Jubi itself. The almost endless pure chakra also made it difficult for Naruto and Sasuke to deal with, and after Kagaya's chakra burst out again, it also broke the balance that Naruto and Sasuke worked together to create. The rotation speed of the truth-seeking jade began to decrease, and the 9 slightly expanded but still spherical truth-seeking jade were clearly visible. At this moment, the chakra in Naruto and Sasuke's bodies fell into a state of extreme exhaustion because they had to neutralize the chakra released by Kagaya. The 9 truth-seeking jade could only rely on their own characteristics to float in the sky at this moment. Even if the truth-seeking jade rings that blocked his attack directly broke, Kagaya didn't hold back at all. He directly rushed his huge chakra in the direction of Naruto and Sasuke. Looks like I can only fight with all my might. It was precisely because of Otsutsuki Kagaya's 80 Gods empty strike that such a voice sounded in the hearts of Naruto and Sasuke at the same time. Facing the threat that can lead to their own death, Naruto and Sasuke's bodies also emerged powerful forces. Bijou chakra gushed out of Naruto's body. The golden Bijou chakra mixed with 6 paths power directly formed a huge golden fist with a clenched fist. Naturally, Sasuke also directly urged his 6 Tomo Rinnegan and Eternal Mangekyo Sharingan. A large amount of dojutsu, chakra, 6 paths power, and the original chakra absorbed from Otsutsuki Kagaya's attack just now were all mixed together, displaying his almost peak Susanoo. Naruto held his giant fist, while Sasuke manipulated his Susanoo. The two of them simultaneously faced the powerful attack of Otsutsuki Kagaya. Black Zetsu hid in Otsutsuki Kagaya's sleeve and watched the battle between Otsutsuki Kagaya, Naruto, and Sasuke. Although it seems that Naruto and Sasuke are at a disadvantage at the moment, Black Zetsu's heart didn't dare to relax at all, because Naruto and Sasuke are simply existences with legendary lives. How old are Naruto and Sasuke now? They're only 16 or 17 years old, but how many people in the history of the shinobi world can possess the power that these two people possess? Youth is the weakness of Naruto and Sasuke. After all, youth represents the weakness of combat experience and experience. But youth is also the biggest advantage of Naruto and Sasuke. Now that Naruto and Sasuke are so powerful, if the potential of the two is stimulated again, how far will the two of them go? It is precisely because he knows what kind of threat Naruto and Sasuke have that Black Zetsu pays so much attention to them at this moment. And Black Zetsu has already begun to think about how to defeat these two young powerhouses if Naruto and Sasuke succeed in resisting this wave of attacks. Break for me! Facing the powerful 80 Gods air attack, Naruto and Sasuke's hearts were full of pressure, but because of the pressure, Naruto and Sasuke's unyielding will burned again. Chakra, 6 paths power, Senjutsu chakra, and so on in their body, as long as it can be called energy, were all released by Naruto and Sasuke without any restrictions. And the powerful 80 Gods air attack also showed a small crack under the joint efforts of Naruto and Sasuke. The dike of 1,000 miles collapses because of an ant's nest. They are not afraid of causing little damage, but they are afraid that there is no way to cause damage at all. After seeing the birth of the crack, Naruto and Sasuke's eyes inevitably showed some joy, and then even their tired bodies suddenly gave birth to strength at this moment. Naruto and Sasuke looked at each other and tacitly attacked again without caring about the consumption. Crack! A crisp sound directly appeared in Naruto and Sasuke's ears. 80 Gods air attack was broken. The huge chakra palm was broken in an instant, and the condensed palm-shaped chakra scattered around like pieces of broken glass. In the process of scattering, these fragments directly turned into energy light spots and directly integrated into the air. Seeing that Naruto and Sasuke's joint efforts actually broke her attack directly, although Otsutsuki Kagaya's face was still cold, but in her eyes, there was an unavoidable look of astonishment. This situation was obviously beyond Otsutsuki Kagaya's expectations. Mother-sama, Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke got 6 pads Yang power and 6 pads Yin power respectively from Hagoromo. When the two of them cooperate to attack or do other things together, they will form a strange resonance with each other, which will increase the strength of the two people at the same time beyond each other's limits. So if you want to deal with these two people, it's better to separate them directly and defeat them one by one. Black Zetsu was hidden in Otsutsuki Kagaya's sleeve and said his judgment to Otsutsuki Kagaya. For Black Zetsu, Otsutsuki Kagaya has almost extreme trust. Seeing Black Zetsu's suggestion, Otsutsuki Kagaya thought about it and nodded, apparently agreeing with Black Zetsu's proposal. A large number of chakra condensed on Otsutsuki Kagaya's forehead. The Scarlet Rinnegan, which originally only revealed a gap, slowly opened at this moment, and a terrifying pressure came out of it. Chapter 713. Heaven's Defense. When the eye on his forehead was fully opened, a powerful coercion also came out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The target of this coercion was not Naruto, Sasuke, or Watergate standing below him, but the sky above him. Under the impact of Rinnegan of 9 Tomo, the sky was directly penetrated, and the penetrated part was like a piece of torn paper, directly swallowed by the dark hole that suddenly appeared above the sky. Naruto, Sasuke, and Watergate didn't know what kind of ninjutsu the so-called Heaven's Defense was, but from the current performance, Heaven's Defense must be a ninjutsu that involves the concept of space. Perhaps because most of his energy was invested in releasing such a powerful ninjutsu as Heaven's Defense, Otsutsuki Kagaya's powerful Byakugan coercion also weakened a bit. Watergate took advantage of the weakening of the shackles on himself and rushed directly to the place where Uchiha and Sasuke were. Watergate's research on space ninjutsu is very profound, and he was directly in Uchiha Obito's Kamui space before, and he felt what kind of existence the artificially created different space is at a close distance. Now, by observing the weak spatial energy coming from the Heaven's Defense, Shuei Men was able to determine that the Heaven's Defense contained a vast space. There is a mark of Flying Thunder God on Naruto's body, but he didn't leave it on Sasuke's body. Once they step into a large space like Heaven's Defense, they will be separated, then the space ninjutsu, Flying Thunder God jutsu, he mastered will be their last life-saving straw. A powerful suction directly enveloped Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and the land around them. Gravel and trees were directly pulled by the powerful suction force in the black hole created by Heaven's Defense and began to be slowly sucked in. The suction speed of Heaven's Defense wasn't very fast, but the people who were controlled by it felt like their bodies were injected with lead, They couldn't move at all, they could only wait for themselves to be sucked into the bottomless black hole full of mystery. No, I must leave a mark on Sasuke's body, otherwise, Naruto and I have no way to deal with Otsutsuki Kagaya. In the battle just now, Watergate has fully seen the strength of Otsutsuki Kagaya herself. From the beginning to the end, Otsutsuki Kagaya only used 80 God's Hollow Attack and Heaven's Defense, 2 ninjutsu, and showed her huge amount of chakra, but these 2 ninjutsu and the almost endless pure chakra already made Watergate's heart full of shock. As the ancestor of chakra, the goddess of Uno, Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate doesn't believe that she only has these 2 special abilities. Although his body is very heavy now, Watergate can still move his body slightly in such an environment. And Watergate found that the speed of Heaven's Defense, attracting stones and trees, seems to be a little faster than the speed of absorbing people. Maybe it's because it takes a lot of power to bind the human body, and the stones and trees themselves don't have any offensive energy, so there's no need to bind them. Because Heaven's Defense is not a ninjutsu, Watergate can judge the nature of Heaven's Defense by some external observations, but there is no way to fully understand the specific details of Heaven's Defense. But now these stones and trees flying faster than himself also gave Watergate an opportunity to achieve his goal. Watergate directly twisted his body slightly, trying to adjust his position with the force of the impact of the stones and trees. The hard stones directly hit his body under Watergate's prediction, and the sharp horns directly pierced into Watergate's flesh. Blood directly oozed out of the wound. Stones and trees constantly hit his body under Watergate's calculation, which also allowed Watergate to get closer to Sasuke's location. The impact of the stones and trees made Watergate's body have many large and small wounds. These wounds, deep or shallow, were constantly oozing blood. But now Watergate has no time to pay attention to his injuries, because he is still a certain distance away from Sasuke, and he and others are about to be absorbed into Heaven's Defense. As long as one more piece, I can get close to Uchiha Sasuke's location. Watergate turned his head and finally found a huge stone rushing in the direction of himself and Sasuke. As long as he can control the way he contacts the stone, he can rely on the huge size of the stone to directly make himself and Sasuke collide, and then engrave the mark of Flying Thunder God on Sasuke's body. 3, 2, 1. It's now. Watergate directly ignored the constant pain in his body, and put his mind on calculating the speed of the stone's flight and how he should hit the stone so that he can quickly get close to Uchiha Sasuke. He adjusted his posture so that the stone could rub him and hit him next to Uchiha Sasuke. The sharp corners directly scratched Watergate's left arm, and the huge wound directly turned over flesh. But Watergate is getting closer and closer to Uchiha Sasuke's location at this moment. Condensing chakra in the palm of his right hand, Watergate tried to open his palm to grab Uchiha Sasuke's body. But at this moment, Watergate and Sasuke are close to the huge hole created by Heaven's Defense. Watergate's palm, condensed with Flying Thunder God's mark, at this moment, only brushed a part of Sasuke's clothes, and only about half of the Flying Thunder God's mark was left on Sasuke's body. However, according to Watergate's judgment, this incomplete Flying Thunder God's mark will only make him a little distance away from Sasuke when he teleports, and it will not directly cause him to be unable to use Flying Thunder God Jutsu to get close to Sasuke. At this moment, although Watergate was also absorbed into Heaven's Defense, his heart has been a lot more stable. After all, some preparations have been made. What he needs to do now is to counter every move and find every opportunity to fight against Otsutsuki Kagaya. Chapter 714. Watergate, Sasuke, and Naruto were sucked into Heaven's Defense one after another. Kagaya saw that his main attack targets were all sucked in, and he also began to prepare to use Yomiuri Yamasaka to move directly into Heaven's Defense. But just as Otsutsuki Kagaya was about to close the entrance of Heaven's Defense, a black shadow suddenly rushed from the ground and rushed directly into the dark hole of Heaven's Defense. Although the movement of the black figure was very fast, with Otsutsuki Kagaya's strength, it was naturally very easy to judge the true identity of this person. This black shadow was naturally Nangongja, who was wearing a black lion-patterned armor and holding the Heaven's Disaster Sword. Nangongzhi suffered a certain injury from Kagaya's sudden attack, but at the same time, Nangongzhi directly escaped from the range of Kagaya's Byakugan coercion. After escaping from such a controlled range, Nangongzhi did not return to the battlefield again, because Nangongzhi was very clear that the main force against Kagaya was Naruto and Sasuke, who had 6-path Yang power and 6-path Yin power. And in his current state, even if he really returned to the battlefield, he would only be easily hit by Kagaya again. So when Nangongzhi regained control of his body, he immediately sat cross-legged on the ground and began to restore his internal strength and sword chi. Nangongzhi was still aware of everything that was happening on the battlefield. Even when he was meditating, he was still paying attention to everything that was happening on the battlefield. Nangongzhi watched Kagaya use 80 God's hollow attack, and also saw Naruto and Sasuke desperately fighting against Kagaya, but Nangongzhi still resisted the urge to help Naruto and Sasuke, and abruptly pressed himself here to restore his internal strength and sword chi. Since Nangongzhi became famous, although he has experienced many difficult battles, but now his heart is constantly filled with regret for his weakness. How long has it been since such a feeling appeared in Nangongzhi's heart? After seeing Kagaya use Heaven's defense, Nangongzhi knew that if he didn't set foot on the battlefield, then he would only push Watergate, Naruto, and Sasuke into the battlefield alone. So after Nangongzhi was ready, he put on the Black Lion heavy armor and rushed towards Kagaya's Heaven's defense with all his strength. A moth to the flame. Kagaya watched Nangongzhi rush directly into the space he created, and his eyes were filled with a bit of ridicule. Otsutsuki Kagaya did not intend to stop Nangongzhi, because the world that Nangongzhi had rushed into was a cage that he had created himself. If he rushed in, it would not be easy to get out. He forcibly controlled Naruto, Sasuke, and Watergate, and then absorbed them in order to deal with them. Now that Nangongzhi rushed directly into Heaven's defense, what's there to stop? Seeing Nangongzhi rush directly into Heaven's defense, Kagaya directly closed the passage of Heaven's defense, and he used Yomiuri Ryazaka technique to directly transfer his body into Heaven's defense. Freely weaving a space, the power of the first ancestor after opening his eyes. The defense of heaven is an amalgamation of 6 dimensions that Kagaya Otsutsuki created with his own power. The defense of heaven includes the lava, ice, supergravity, sand, acid, and other dimensions. These 5 dimensions are directly connected to the primordial sphere. In other words, the so-called Heaven's Defense was like a 5-petaled flower. The 5 dimensions of lava, ice, supergravity, sand, and acid revolved around the origin sphere that was the center of everything. Although the petals were relatively independent, it was because of the origin sphere that the stamen could directly form a complete flower. After entering Heaven's Defense, Kagaya naturally also directly displayed his ability as the controller of Heaven's Defense, and began to locate the positions of Naruto, Sasuke, Nangongzhi, and Watergate. Soon, Otsutsuki Kagaya directly determined the location of several people and divided them into several groups. Uchiha Sasuke, who is proficient in fire release, was directly thrown into the ice space by Otsutsuki Kagaya. Although fire can give people warmth, when the ice is cold enough, it can also condense fire. This is a space that can fully restrain Uchiha Sasuke. Naruto himself used some close-range attack ninjutsu in battle. Such ninjutsu is strong, but it also has a great burden on his body. As long as it can weaken Naruto's own physical fitness to a certain extent, it will actually abolish most of Naruto's strength. Therefore, Kagaya directly threw Naruto into the acid space, trying to restrain Naruto with the powerful acid sea in this space. Nangongzhi and Watergate, 2 people who did not receive enough attention from Kagaya, were also directly thrown into the supergravity space by Black Zetsu's reminder. The gravity in the supergravity space is far beyond common sense, which will put a great burden on the human body, and will also reduce people's speed to a limit. Watergate is good at using Flying Thunder God Jutsu with Body Flicker Jutsu and a variety of melee attacks to cause damage to the enemy. Nangongzhi is good at using his own exquisite swordsmanship with internal strength and sword chi to deal with the enemy. In fact, there is no particularly obvious way to deal with the situation of the two, But the supergravity space itself is almost a jack of all trades, so throwing Nangongzhe and Watergate into it can also restrain them, so that they have no way to affect the battle situation in other places. At this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya is floating in the primordial sphere, constantly absorbing chakra from the chakra tree, trying to accumulate as much chakra as possible. Once the accumulation is completed, Otsutsuki Kagaya will immediately go to each space to defeat his 4 enemies one by one. Chapter 7:15. Looking at the slightly greenish ground under his feet that looked like a layer of sharp spikes, Nangongzhe's forehead involuntarily dripped with sweat. Nangongzhe entered Heaven's defense in his black armor. In the beginning, Nangongzhe himself was suspended in a black space. Although it wasn't the same, Nangongzhe knew that this black space was the same as the space crevice he saw when he was searching for the Lion Clan space. Before Nangongzhe had time to take a good look, a huge suction force suddenly appeared behind Nangongzhe and pulled him into this strange space. After entering this space, Nangongzhe quickly noticed the strangeness of this space. After entering this space, Nangongzhe clearly felt that his body had become heavier. It was as if the air around him and his body had become heavier. Even his movements were hindered. Nangongzhe could feel that his body had become at least 5 times heavier. Now, Nangongzhe could barely maintain his standing posture. It was already very difficult for him to not be knocked down by such a strong pressure. Feeling that his body had slightly adapted to the gravity in this space, Nangongzhe began to slowly move his feet. He wanted to explore the specific situation of this space. After walking for less than a meter, Nangongzhe suddenly felt that the pressure on his body had become lighter. However, Nangongzhe was not in a hurry. Instead, he slowly walked in the direction he had randomly chosen. After walking for less than a meter, a pressure that was 5 times stronger than the previous gravity directly acted on Nangongzhe's body. As expected, this space isn't a simple place. Gravity itself was a force that acted on a person's entire body. From the inside out, the person would be squeezed by gravity. After undergoing professional training, the limit of gravity that a person could withstand was 3 times the normal gravity. Moreover, this was only bearable. It did not mean that a person could walk freely under such gravity. Once the theoretical limit of 3 times the normal gravity was exceeded, the human body would bleed profusely. The organs in the body would also become dysfunctional or even directly rupture due to the huge pressure. Because Nangongzhe had powerful strength, inner strength, and sword chi to protect his body, the fragile organs in his body were already protected. This was also the important reason why Nangongzhe could barely move in a space with gravity that exceeded the limit of the human body. According to the current situation, the gravity in this supergravity space was not evenly distributed. Instead, the magnitude of the gravity would change from place to place. With such a change, not to mention fighting, even the simplest of walking would be a problem. Just as Nangongzhe was still walking around in this supergravity space, he suddenly saw a familiar thing in a corner of the ground, the flying thunder god Kanai. This Kanai, could it be that Watergate also entered this space? Looking at the flying thunder god Kanai that was inserted diagonally into the ground, Nangongzhe roughly judged the trajectory of this Kanai. It was obvious that Watergate threw this Kanai at a very low point, because this Kanai was almost directly lying on the ground. This showed that when Watergate threw this Kanai, it was very likely that his body was in a relatively low position. Under what circumstances would a person be in a relatively low position? Sitting down? Or falling down? When thinking of this, Nangongzhe's heart became a little impatient. Although the relationship between Nangongzhe and Minato wasn't that close, and there were many conflicts between the two of them, both in the open and in the dark. But Watergate must not die here now. In this battle with Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate and Nangongzhe were not the main forces. Although Nangongzhe didn't know much, Nangongzhe was very clear that the relationship between Naruto and Watergate was actually closer than what they showed on the surface. Once Watergate had any problems, Naruto would directly lose control. The battle has never been about whose voice is louder, whose face is more ferocious. What can really bring victory is a calm heart and a concentrated spirit. Once Watergate had any problems, as a child of Watergate, Naruto would definitely directly lose his calmness in his heart. They were already at a disadvantage when facing Kagaya Otsutsuki. In terms of strength, they couldn't pose much of a threat to Kagaya Otsutsuki. The more they were at a disadvantage, the more they had to remain calm. Otherwise, they wouldn't even have room to resist and would be defeated directly. Nangongja almost broke out of his strength, moving towards the position where he judged Watergate to be. It didn't take long for Nangongja to directly see Watergate's iconic medium-length golden hair. At this moment, Watergate's body was covered with large and small wounds, lying face down on the ground. The wounds on Watergate's body were bleeding a lot due to the gravity, and scarlet blood flowed directly from Watergate's body to the ground. Although a ninja's physical fitness was far superior to ordinary people, it was more reflected in their recovery ability and strength. In terms of defensive ability and resistance to pressure, Nangongja, who had cultivated internal force and sword energy, was still inferior. Obviously, after entering this space, Watergate was also suppressed by the gravity. Watergate's body was covered with large and small wounds, and under the strong gravity, he was bleeding a lot. Due to the large amount of blood loss, coupled with the huge pressure on his body due to the effect of gravity, Minato's body could only fall directly here, and the flying thunder god kunai in his hand was also directly thrown away. However, thanks to the kunai thrown out by Watergate, Nangongja might not have found Watergate. Now that he has seen Watergate, Nangongja naturally won't leave easily. Instead, he came to Watergate's side, ready to help Watergate deal with the large and small injuries. Chapter 716. Half squatting beside Watergate, Nangongja directly stretched out his hand and pulled out the large and small stones and wooden sticks that pierced Watergate's body one by one. After taking out the foreign objects that had pierced into the flesh, Nangongja immediately placed his palm that was imbued with internal force on the wound. Under the control of Nangongja, his internal force directly attached to the wound, directly stopping the blood from flowing out and alleviating Watergate's bleeding situation. After taking out some bandages and medicine to treat Watergate's external injuries, Nangongja's expression didn't become relaxed. Instead, he became more serious. When treating Watergate's external injuries, Nangongja also checked Watergate's internal injuries to a certain extent. And the conclusion he got was not very optimistic. Because Minato's back had been hit by the rocks and trees, there was a large area of blood clot. His internal organs were also slightly damaged. For a ninja of Watergate's level, this kind of injury can be completely healed after a period of rest, but Watergate's injury wasn't treated well, and he directly entered the supergravity space where the pressure was far greater than the outside world. The strong pressure directly expanded Watergate's internal injuries to infinitely expand, and now it's even to the point where it's life-threatening. Even with his internal force, Nangongja didn't have a good way to heal Watergate's internal injuries. After all, Nangongja is a swordsman who focuses on fighting and only has a little understanding of healing. It's really difficult for Nangongja to heal such a serious injury for Nangongja. Nangongja can only inject a large amount of his internal force into Watergate's body, and with the internal force, he barely repaired Watergate's internal injuries temporarily. After circulating the internal force in Watergate's meridians 3 times, he directly controlled the internal force to rush into Watergate's brain. Originally, he fell into a coma due to excessive blood loss, but Nangongja's internal force directly drilled into Watergate's brain and woke up the brain that fell into a coma due to self-protection. Nangongja? Watergate slowly opened his eyes and immediately found Nangongja beside him. Perhaps because he just woke up from a coma, Watergate didn't call Nangongja Chief Nangong, but directly called out Nangongja's name. However, Nangongja isn't a person who will stick to such trivial matters. After seeing that Watergate has woken up, Nangongja directly said to Watergate, "Sandame Hokai-sama, I believe that you should also be clear about the internal situation of your body. Now that your internal organs are basically broken and bleeding, I have already carried out emergency treatment for you, but after all, I am not a professional medical ninja, so my treatment can only temporarily prevent such injuries from worsening." The internal force used to repair your internal organs can only work for a limited period of time, and if your body suffers too much damage, it is not impossible for the internal force to be scattered. I don't know if you understand what I mean. Although Nangongzhi didn't say it explicitly, his words were actually telling Watergate that the reason why Watergate can stay awake now is actually because Nangongzhi used his internal force as a glue to repair the damaged internal organs in Watergate's body, temporarily allowing various organs in Watergate's body to recover their functions. But this kind of glue is not permanent. Once it is hit to a certain extent, the internal force will directly collapse. The inevitable consequence of the collapse of the internal force is that the organs in his body that were barely glued together will immediately rupture or even suffer more serious injuries. Now in front of Watergate, Nangongzhi actually has two choices, either to directly hide in the corner of the battlefield to save his life, or to directly ignore the fact that he may die and directly fight with Otsutsuki Kagaya. In fact, this is a question that doesn't need to be asked to get the answer. Watergate has always been a person who puts his own interests before the interests of the public. Faced with the two choices provided by Nangongzhi, Watergate didn't think much and directly stood up with the help of Nangongzhi. At the moment when he stood up, Watergate directly made a hand seal to absorb the natural energy in the air to enter the Sage mode so that he can have the power to fight. But when Watergate began to release his spiritual force to draw the natural energy into his body, he suddenly found that the density of natural energy in this space is extremely close to zero. After releasing his spiritual force for a long time, Watergate didn't draw much natural energy into his body. He can only use part of the Senjutsu chakra that he barely condensed to directly wrap the organs in his body. With the help of the internal force to slowly repair the organs in his body, Watergate's complexion also looked a lot better. After a little sensing the situation in his body, Watergate said to Nangongzhi, "Now the injuries on my body have been slightly stabilized. Don't worry too much. As long as I am not directly hit by a powerful attack, there will be basically no problems." Maybe you don't know much about it, Nangongzhi, but the place we are in now is actually a huge space ninjutsu. That is to say, this space is actually artificially created. Before entering this space, I knew that several of us would definitely be separated. Naruto's body has my Flying Thunder God imprint, so don't worry too much, and before entering this space, I also desperately imprinted the Flying Thunder God imprint on Sasuke's body. And you and I happen to be in this space. As long as I use the Flying Thunder God jutsu, all four of us can be gathered together. Although this space ninjutsu is indeed very dangerous, I think that as long as the strength of the four of us can be gathered together, we will definitely be able to find a way to deal with these dangers. Watergate's words actually have no specific basis, just some personal inferences. Nangongzhi didn't like such words of encouragement, but one thing Watergate said was right, that is, gathering four people is definitely more effective than fighting alone. Chapter 717. Seeing that his plan was approved by Nangongzhi, Watergate closed his eyes and began to carefully explore the strength of this space. At the beginning, Watergate just spread his spiritual force inside the space. After a simple deduction, Watergate found that although it was difficult to perform a space jump in the supergravity space, Watergate could do it. But when Watergate fully spread his spiritual force, he found that there was no space coordinate for Naruto and Sasuke in this supergravity space. Seeing that it wasn't difficult to perform a space jump inside the space, Watergate also began to try to break through the space barrier with his spiritual force. But the moment his spiritual force touched the space barrier, Watergate's whole face became ugly. At the moment when his spiritual force touched the space barrier, Watergate already felt that his spiritual force was being swallowed by a large amount. Now is not the time to weaken his spiritual force, so Watergate immediately retracted his spiritual force after touching such a barrier. Nangong-sama, there seems to be something wrong with this space. Watergate looked at Nangongzhi with a bad expression, and said to Nangongzhi that his spiritual force was being swallowed after touching the space barrier. Nangongzhi also felt very troubled at the moment. After all, in the ninja world, Watergate can be said to be one of the most proficient ninja in space ninjutsu, but even such an existence still thinks that the current situation is very tricky, which made Nangongzhi quite a bit unprepared. There is a barrier that can swallow spiritual force? If there is no way to use spiritual force, then the Flying Thunder God Jutsu can't be used. This is really... Yandame-sama, I know that you have an extremely deep understanding of space ninjutsu, but I don't know how we can leave this space and find Naruto and Sasuke? Hearing Nangong's question, Watergate also began to think carefully. After all, whether it is Watergate or Nangongja, both of them are people who dare to face challenges. Although such a problem is tricky, they can always find a solution. This is the confidence of Watergate and Nangongja as strong people. Although this spiritual barrier is very strong, it's not impossible for me to break through it if I don't care about the consumption. At that time, what we need to face now is not only this space barrier, but also a powerful existence that can overturn the ninja world at any time after breaking through the space barrier. Based on my observations, I believe that although this barrier has an extremely powerful effect on mental strength, it shouldn't be able to exert such a powerful effect on pure physical attacks. Moreover, in the ninja world, most of the barriers directly target energy like chakra. Nangong's internal force and sword chi are completely different from chakra. Once you can directly attack the space barrier, I believe that it will be able to greatly weaken the space barrier, and even drill a small hole in the space barrier, allowing us to directly leave this space. Watergate's words are indeed very reasonable. After all, internal force cultivators have been declining in the ninja world for many years, and even in the era when internal force cultivators were prosperous, there were very few people who could cultivate sword chi. How can there be a barrier in the ninja world that can specifically target the internal force and sword chi used by Nangongja? Directly attack the space barrier? Although I did rely on the cooperation of Natural Chakra and Heaven's Retribution Sword to directly open a space channel, my own attainments and understanding of space are not that profound. In this space, I think Fourth Hokage can clearly feel that there is very little natural chakra in this space. I really don't have any means to directly penetrate the space barrier and directly attack the space barrier. Nangongja has never been a stubborn person. In fact, Nangongja can directly face what he knows and what he doesn't know. No one is perfect, and naturally, there is no such thing as an omnipotent person. If you have a weakness, you should face it well instead of trying to cover it up. About this, I actually thought about it. Looking at Nangongja, Watergate seemed to have found a solution without thinking. Of course, Watergate has a very comprehensive understanding of Nangongja. In the beginning, Nangongja lived in Woodleaf Village for a long time. Even if Nangongja didn't do anything to harm the interests of the village, as the leader of Woodleaf Village, Watergate will naturally do a thorough investigation. Nangongja has been active in the ninja world as a Woodleaf Village ninja for a long time. Naturally, Woodleaf Village has a very deep understanding of Nangongja's personal temperament. After that, although Nangongja's whereabouts are mysterious, basically every time Nangongja makes a move, there will be a Woodleaf Village ninja around Nangongja, so some of Nangongja's moves are also recorded by Woodleaf Village ninja. Woodleaf Village's comprehensive evaluation of Nangongja is a strong person with internal force and sword energy, unparalleled in close range, difficult to defeat in medium range, and has the possibility of self-defense in long range. And Watergate, as a ninja proficient in spatial ninjutsu, naturally conducted a certain degree of investigation on Nangongja's mysterious whereabouts. Watergate found that to maintain such a fast movement, only a space-type ability can support it. So after a series of investigations, Watergate discovered that Nangongja seems to have the ability to open a space channel from clues. After all, now is the time for a joint battle. Nangongja is not ready to directly fall out with Watergate. His spatial ability has too many loopholes, so Nangongja deliberately exaggerated one of his weaknesses to gain Watergate's trust, or to let Watergate feel at ease, and said it to Watergate. A really good lie is never a pure lie. The best lie is half true and half false, or even 90% true and 10% false. Because even 90% of the truth is far less dangerous than a 10% lie that can be covered up and distorted. Is Nangongja's space jump really that big of a limitation? If Watergate really believes it, then Watergate is a real fool. Even if he and Nangongja do cooperate to do something, But really, in the ninja world, how can there be eternal enemies or eternal friends that don't belong to the same force? Chapter 7:18. Nangong's concealment was naturally done seamlessly, and Watergate's suspicions would not dissipate because of Nangong's perfect concealment. Standing from different perspectives, the problems they think about are naturally different. Naruto and Sasuke, as ninja who obeyed Woodleaf Village and ninja who worked for Bloodcloak Pavilion, can cooperate in the face of a common enemy at this moment. However, Nangongja and Watergate are respectively the head of Bloodcloak Pavilion and the fourth Hokage of Woodleaf Village. But since they have reached such a position, whether it is Watergate or Nangongja, they will not shirk the responsibility brought by their identity. Although Nangongja and Watergate have their own considerations, it has to be said that the two of them have a common enemy in Otsutsuki Kagaya, so Nangongja and Watergate can only temporarily postpone some of their plans under great pressure. Everything must be put after defeating Otsutsuki Kagaya. Nangongja and Watergate have reached a tacit consensus in their hearts at this moment. After all, in the face of such a peerless powerhouse like Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate and Nangongja must not have the slightest slack or distraction. Otherwise, the ninja world will be destroyed by Otsutsuki Kagaya. What can Nangongja and Watergate's plans count as? Nangong head, I have also considered what you said. After all, space is really a mysterious and difficult thing to understand. Even if I have studied it for many years, I dare not say that I really know much about space. What I can touch is only a little bit of the real power of space. Minato didn't lie, because time and space were too mysterious and difficult to detect existences. We can still touch elements of nature like metal, wood, water, fire, earth, wind, and thunder with our own hands and use our own eyes to perceive them. But how can we perceive things like time and space, which are close to concepts? In what way? Even if we know that we are affected by time and space all the time and space are still in existence that we can't touch, and we can't even describe with words. Although I've only scratched the surface, I've found a lot of techniques that aren't that powerful but are very useful in the application of space. Actually, it's not as difficult to let Nangong Head's sword chi directly attack the space barrier as we thought. Just now, the barrier did indeed absorb my mental strength, but I can clearly feel that after my mental strength entered the barrier, it wasn't immediately devoured. Instead, it seemed to be stored. Because of this, I have now roughly figured out the spatial location of the space barrier. With this data, I can directly inscribe a rune on your weapon that can attack the space barrier. As long as the runes still exist, then Nangong Gong, your attacks will be able to directly affect the space barrier. With your powerful inner strength and sword chi, you will definitely be able to find a path to victory for us. Although Watergate's description wasn't very detailed, the more Nangongja listened, the more he felt that Watergate's understanding of space was definitely not as simple as superficial. As long as he could figure out the spatial coordinates, he could directly ignore the distance between spaces and directly transfer the attack to the space barrier between spaces. But he only relied on inscribing runes? If this kind of ability is considered superficial, then what are the other ninjutsu that are labeled as powerful? Nangongja naturally cherished his god's disaster sword very much. Watergate's so-called inscribing of Nangongja wasn't sure if it would directly damage the sword. Nangongja had always believed that the god's disaster sword had its own sword soul. If he wanted his sword to be truly sharp, the first thing he had to do was to respect his sword, and then respect his own dignity as a swordsman. Therefore, Nangongja directly opened his hand. Sword chi and internal strength continuously condensed in his palm. A small sword about 3 inches long and 2 fingers wide formed by interweaving sword chi and internal strength directly floated in Nangongja's hand. Void sword condensation. This was an ability that Nangongja had never displayed before. However, after seeing Nangongja's floating small sword appear in his hand, Watergate had already thought of many possible applications of this ability in his mind. Woodleaf's original evaluation of Nangongja was that Nangongja's own long-range attacks weren't as threatening as his close-range attacks. However, this small sword floating in Nangongja's hand could clearly be controlled by Nangongja from a distance. Since Nangongzhi could control one sword without any burden, then what would happen if Nangongzhi could control 2, 3, 10, or even 100 swords? The subtle competition between Watergate and Nangongzhi was constantly revealing the trump cards that they had deliberately left behind. However, no matter if it was Nangongzhi or Watergate, they didn't have a trace of regret in their hearts. After all, a war might really break out between the two of them in the future. Since that was the case, they had to leave a shadow in each other's heart and let each other know how difficult it was to deal with them. Only a fool would pretend to be a pig to eat a tiger, because the consequences of pretending to be a pig to eat a tiger might really be that of a pig. Therefore, Watergate and Nangongzhi's choice was to win the psychological war even if they had to reveal their trump cards. This was the best strategy in war. Of course I can do that. Although Watergate was shocked, he was still able to perfectly control his expression. At this moment, whether it was Watergate's eyes or his expression, he had a gentle attitude, even though Watergate's heart had become extremely cold. Nangongzhi looked at Watergate. Although he couldn't see anything from his face and eyes, Nangongzhi was very clear that Watergate's heart couldn't be so calm at this moment. He stretched out his hand and handed the small sword that was condensed from his internal strength and sword chi to Watergate. Watergate directly stretched out his finger and gently placed it on the blade of the small sword. His finger seemed to tremble slightly, and the sharp sword chi on the small sword directly cut a thin wound on Watergate's finger. The wound wasn't very big, but blood constantly flowed out from it. Watergate didn't care about the deep wound on his hand. Instead, he directly injected his chakra into his blood. Then, on the small sword in Nangongzhi's hand, he wrote a rune that was similar to the flying thunder god's kanai, but more complicated. Chapter 719. Although the runes were cumbersome, Watergate himself had deep attainments in spatial runes and sealing techniques, so Watergate engraved them very quickly. The blood-containing chakra was directly engraved by Watergate on the small sword in Nangongzhi's hand, and the piercing chill emitted from the small sword made Watergate more serious. His fingertips danced, and finally, Watergate made the last stroke. When the last rune was completed by Watergate, all the runes engraved by Watergate's blood began to surge. The runes influenced and cooperated with each other, and the mysterious and unpredictable spatial aura was directly transmitted from this small sword. After several changes in their combination, all of the runes suddenly emitted a dazzling red light, and then directly melted into the small sword. A trace of blood-colored silk directly appeared in the small sword. The original azure small sword and the scarlet silk that filled the inside of the small sword at this moment formed a strange and unique beauty. Chief Nangong, I have already transmitted the spatial coordinates into this sword. However, the spatial coordinates may not be that accurate, so I hope that you can expand your attack range as much as possible. At the same time, you have to ensure the strength of your attack. After all, Watergate only relied on his own psychic power that had not dissipated to determine the specific location of the spatial barrier, but what kind of state the spatial barrier was, whether it was Watergate or Nangongzhi, they actually didn't know. So what Nangongzhi and Watergate could do was to expand the attack range as much as possible to ensure that they could really hit the spatial barrier. I understand. Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongzhi also quickly understood the meaning of Watergate. Although he and Watergate had more or less some disputes, the priority now was to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya, otherwise, everything would be impossible. Nangongzhi slightly lifted the small sword in his hand, and the other hand made a sword finger, and the fingertips were facing the small sword in his hand. A trace of small sword energy directly gushed out from Nangongzhi's fingertips. In order not to destroy the runes engraved by Watergate on the small sword, Nangongzhi did not let the sword energy directly supplement the small sword, but directly let the sword energy surround the small sword. The small sword energy was too thin, so it looked a bit bright white. Just like 100 birds paying homage to a phoenix, the small sword that was condensed from sword chi and inner strength seemed to be filled with a kind of attraction to the small sword chi. The sword chi lingered on the small sword, adding a beautiful bright white ribbon to the small sword. Nangongzhi nodded to Watergate, as if to tell Watergate that he was ready. For Nangong's means, Watergate didn't understand it very well, but the dangerous aura from the small sword and the white ribbon was real. Watergate could clearly feel how dangerous the small sword and the bright white ribbon were. If it really had a strong power as strong as his perception, it was not impossible to drill a hole in the spatial barrier. Go! Nangong's gently lifted the small sword in his hand and wrapped his inner strength around the small sword. He pointed his sword forward and the small sword was propelled forward by his inner strength. Even in the supergravity space, the increased gravity did not affect the flying speed of the small sword at all. The small sword flew faster and faster in the air, and the rune that Watergate carved with his own blood in the small sword seemed to be affected by the speed. The red light became more and more dazzling. When the red light reached its peak, it directly covered the entire small sword. With a flash of light, the small sword completely disappeared from the space. Although he couldn't see where the small sword flew to, Nangong's could still rely on the connection between him and the small sword to sense that the small sword was being guided by the blood mark in his body to a place quickly. After the small sword was no longer bound by the supergravity space, it seemed to have become faster. In just a moment, Nangong's could clearly sense that the small sword was infinitely close to the target. As the small sword flew slower and slower, Nangong's finally reached the peak of this feeling, and the feeling in his heart became stronger and stronger. Nangong's directly formed a hand seal that was different from the ninjutsu hand seals in front of his chest, and softly shouted, "Explode!" Although he didn't know how far away the small sword was, the moment Nangong's issued his command, the sword energy and internal force inside the small sword began to attack each other. The internal force was neutral and peaceful, while the sword energy was sharp and overbearing. These two things were very different in nature. When Nangong's was in his body, Nangong's could rely on his own spiritual force to maintain the balance between the two, and even make them promote each other. But once Nangong's completely withdrew his spiritual force and deliberately broke the balance between the two, the sword energy and internal force began to attack each other. A large amount of energy collided with each other, and the power caused by such a collision was difficult to estimate. Finally, the bright white ribbon condensed by Nangong's small sword energy dispersed again at this moment, turning back into small sword energy. These sword energy continued to divide into shorter and denser sword energy. The ribbons that were originally wrapped around the small swords had now become short but upright filaments that directly wrapped around the small swords that were slightly deformed due to the constant collisions within them. Finally, the internal force and sword energy in the small sword seemed to have reached the limit of the conflict between them, and Nangong's spiritual force left in the small sword could no longer restrain such an impact. Like a balloon exploding, the balloon with the small sword as the inside and the sword energy as the outer layer directly exploded. The dense and small sword energy was directly pushed away by the force of the explosion, and the explosion of the small sword itself became even more terrifying because of the outer layer condensed by the sword energy. The blood-red runes engraved by Watergate on the small sword had completely turned into blood-red energy and directly dispersed in the explosion of energy, giving the energy the ability to supply the existence of the realm. Chapter 720. It wasn't only Nangong's who was paying attention to the changes inside the space, but Watergate was also paying attention to the place where his psychic force was left behind. Nangong's controlled his sword to attack the place where his psychic force was left behind, and Watergate was naturally able to observe the changes in the space barrier through this psychic force. Watergate could clearly feel that the space barrier was getting thinner and thinner, and the powerful impact was constantly weakening the space barrier. Even Watergate's psychic force that was restrained by the space barrier seemed to have some room to move. Now is the time. Just when Nangong's was constantly urging his sword to burst out more power, Watergate suddenly put his hand on Nangong's shoulder, and a large amount of chakra surged in his body, directly wrapping himself and Nangong's in a chakra barrier. Nangong's and Watergate's figure flashed, and directly appeared in the dark space gap where Nangong's was temporarily sucked into the defense of heaven. A somewhat transparent crimson crystal barrier directly appeared in the sight of Nangong's and Watergate. At this moment, It was obvious that a part of the crimson crystal barrier had very deep cracks, and compared to the other parts of the barrier, it was obvious that a part of the barrier was caved in. Watergate and Nangongja were now in front of this hole. Is this the space barrier you mentioned, fourth Hokage? Nangongja looked at the crimson crystal barrier and asked Watergate, who was standing beside him. Watergate's eyes were also filled with a faint blurriness at this moment. As a ninja proficient in space ninjutsu, the space gap and the space barrier in front of him at this moment were too attractive for Watergate. If he had enough time, he would definitely be able to study a lot of precious knowledge that he had never touched before. But unfortunately, Watergate didn't have enough time. With a little disappointment in his eyes, Watergate said to Nangongja, "Yes, this is the space barrier we need to break. When we were in the gravity space before, this space barrier was very intact, so I couldn't directly move the two of us directly into such a space gap. But thanks to your attack, Nangongja, a gap appeared in such a space barrier, so I can directly come into this space gap to observe the situation of the space barrier at close range and then make the corresponding strategy." After getting Watergate's confirmation, Nangongja looked at the broken space barrier and said to Watergate, "What do you want me to do now? Attack again to break this space barrier?" Watergate heard Nangongja's question, shook his head, and said to Nangongja, "Nangongja, please don't be impatient. With the strength of you and me, although it is quite difficult to break such a space barrier, it is naturally possible to do it together. But what we are facing now is not a space barrier that is natural. This space barrier is built by our enemy, Kagaya Otsutsuki. Once we really break the space barrier so simply and violently, then Kagaya Otsutsuki is likely to be able to sense what is happening here and make preparations in advance. At that time, we will inevitably fall into a passive position, but if we think about it in reverse, we may be able to directly penetrate such a space barrier in a more secretive way and then enter the core of this space, then we will be the ones with the advantage." Hearing Watergate's words, Nangongja also understood Watergate's plan. After all, Kagaya Otsutsuki is more powerful than the four of them combined. If you want to win against the strong, the most important principles to abide by are to be bold, careful, and hide your true intentions and even your own existence as much as possible under any circumstances. In that case, I have a general idea. Since he agreed with Watergate's plan, Nangongja naturally began to think about how to break through such a space barrier. Nangongja's eyes swept through some cracks that still have sword chi and internal force raging. Suddenly, his eyes moved and he said to Watergate, "Through what happened just now, we have been able to find that such a space barrier has a very high resistance to chakra and mental power, but it doesn't have much defensive ability against the sword chi and internal force that I can mobilize. We can directly wrap ourselves in internal force like now, and use the sword chi as a drill to directly attack the weak part of the space barrier. In this way, we have a high possibility of directly penetrating such a space barrier. What Nangongja can see, Watergate can naturally see. Therefore, Nangongja is very clear in his heart that Watergate wants him to stand up and take on the task of breaking through the space barrier. Breaking through the space barrier will naturally greatly weaken Nangongja's internal force and sword chi. This is also Watergate's insurance for himself, an insurance that Nangongja can't refuse. This was a blatant conspiracy. We need to break through the space barrier, and the only person who can break through the space barrier is you. After breaking through the space barrier, you will have to consume a lot of energy. Your consumption is a very good thing for me. For the future of the shinobi world and your own ambitions, you have to become a knife in my hand and be my vanguard." Watergate's move can be said to have completely pushed himself to the position of initiative, and in order to not have the slightest chance of being criticized, Nangongja directly opened his mouth and directly took on such an action that won't have much benefit and will even bring some harm to himself. Just like what he said before, Nangongja had no reason to refuse. After hearing Nangongja's words, Watergate looked at Nangongja apologetically and then said to Nangongja, "In that case, I'll have to trouble you, Nangongja." Nangongja took a deep look at Watergate, then directly turned his body and released a large amount of internal force and sword chi. The internal force condensed into a ball that wrapped himself and Watergate in it, and the sword chi directly turned into a huge drill that directly attached to the front of the ball. Chapter 721. Although Watergate did put some effort into this matter, there is no way for him to avoid it. After all, Nangongzhi still has his own responsibilities and obligations behind him, pushing him to fight against a powerful existence like Kagaya. Nangongzhi's body constantly rushed out of his body, and the kenki constantly converged on the tip of the drill that Nangongzhi just created. With the continuous integration of the kenki, the drill also became harder and sharper. Fourth Hokage, get ready, I'm going to go directly. After Nangongzhi reminded Watergate, he didn't wait for Watergate's response and directly urged the internal energy in his body. The sphere that was formed by internal energy, including Nangongzhi and Watergate, also began to rush in the direction of the crimson crystal wall under Nangongzhi's control. Although Nangongzhi didn't give Watergate enough time to adjust his body after reminding him, but after all, Watergate is also a powerful existence who stands at the peak of the ninja world, and even has one foot in the peak of the ninja world. Such a simple operation like stabilizing his body is completely possible for him. After attaching chakra to the soles of his feet, Watergate adjusted his body a little, and directly stood in the sphere of internal energy like Nangongzhi. No matter how the sphere accelerated and rotated, Watergate still remained motionless. Soon, Nangongzhi used his internal energy and kenki to create a drill directly connected with the crimson crystal wall. Under Nangongzhi's control, the sharp drill condensed by kenki directly pierced into Nangongzhi's largest and deepest crack. After the drill completely penetrated into the crack, the kenki that originally looked like a drill also began to rotate under Nangongzhi's control. In the process of rotating, the kenki began to rush out of the drill's shackles and began to cut the crimson crystal wall around it. At first, it was a difficult task for the small kenki to cooperate with the drill to cut the crystal wall. But soon, Nangongzhi seemed to have found a way. The angle of the kenki cutting the crystal wall was no longer straight, but with a slight curve. The crystal wall itself was transparent, but Nangongzhi seemed to have discovered the texture contained in the transparent crystal wall, and with a very small amount of kenki, he could directly cut the hard crystal wall. However, this huge crimson crystal wall was located in a space crack after all. In the past, when Nangongzhi was looking for the Lion Clan's alternate space, he had drifted through a space crack. Even now, Nangongzhi's heart was filled with lingering fear when he recalled the danger at that time. The current Nangongzhi was naturally much stronger than before, but in the face of an existence like the realm that was beyond the understanding and touch of ordinary humans, Nangongzhi's heart was filled with an indescribable awe. Humans were often the most courageous when they were at their most ignorant. This was because ignorance would make people unable to perceive the dangers hidden in the things they faced. Since they couldn't see the dangers, they naturally wouldn't become afraid. But when a person's cognition became richer and richer, and they were able to observe the things they faced from all angles, the irresistible fear or awe would directly devour the courage hidden in their hearts. Nangongzhi was naturally the same. After so many years of ups and downs in the shinobi world, Nangongzhi was down and out, Nangongzhi was glorious, and now, Nangongzhi was in control of a force that couldn't be ignored in the shinobi world, the Blood Cloak Pavilion, and became an existence that even the 5 great shinobi villages of the shinobi world had to face. At this moment, Nangongzhi was once again facing the space crack that he once wandered through. The awe in his heart was even more intense. This was also why Nangongzhi was so careful to control his kenki and internal force so that he could complete what he needed to do with the least consumption. The space crack wasn't a playground for children. As long as there was a negligence, it was likely to lead to extremely serious consequences. Nangongzhi and Watergate weren't afraid of death, but their own death would cause chaos to an organization, a force, a country, and even the shinobi world. Such consequences naturally made Watergate and Nangongzhi have to be very careful and cautious. The crimson crystal wall was penetrated little by little. Finally, with a crisp sound, Nangongzhi drilled a small gap in the crimson crystal wall. On the opposite side of the gap was a black space crack that was also shrouded in darkness, but Watergate's face showed a little joy. This must be the core of the so-called space-time ninjutsu, Heaven's Defense, that Otsutsuki Kagaya mentioned. Although this space crack is similar to the previous one, it contains a larger space force. As long as this space force is used, it can easily complete the jump between spaces. And here, I can clearly sense the mark of Flying Thunder God that I deliberately left on Naruto and Sasuke. Gently closing his eyes, Watergate directly unfolded his spiritual force and carefully observed the space crack around him. Using his spiritual force to capture a part of the space energy, Watergate's hands began to quickly form hand seals. Usually, when Watergate used the Flying Thunder God jutsu, if it was a short distance, he didn't need to form hand seals at all. If it was some advanced ninjutsu that was extended from the Flying Thunder God jutsu, he would need to form hand seals 2 or 3 times to guide the chakra. But this time, Watergate's hands were constantly forming hand seals. According to Nangongjia's statistics, Watergate formed at least 20 hand seals in this very short time, and most of them were not conventional hand seals used to perform ninjutsu. Nangongjia wasn't a ninja who practiced chakra and performed ninjutsu in the conventional sense. Although Nangongjia was very clear about the common sense of ninja, he wasn't a ninja after all, so he didn't have the ability to judge the nature of a ninjutsu from the combination of ninja hand seals and non-conventional hand seals. But the more hand seals, the longer the preparation time, the more powerful a ninjutsu can be. Now that Watergate had prepared a ninjutsu for such a long time, naturally, it wouldn't be a bad product. Chapter 722. Reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Finally, after preparing for a long time, Watergate ended his fingers flying up and down, and the name of the ninjutsu that he had been brewing for a long time was also said by Watergate. It's just one more word than the Flying Thunder God Jutsu that Watergate has always used, but the extra word has extraordinary significance. The principle of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu is that the caster directly transfers his body to the location set by himself through the relevant theory of space jump. Later, after a series of improvements, Watergate developed the Flying Thunder God Guide, which is a way to set up a barrier on the Flying Thunder God kunai and then wrap the energy in it to transfer it. But the Flying Thunder God Guide can only transfer energy, and the location of the transfer can't be too far away, otherwise, the transfer is likely to fail. In other words, in fact, the Flying Thunder God Guide is an incomplete version of the Reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu that Watergate is using now. Being able to transfer objects with the Flying Thunder God mark for his own use is an important stage goal that Watergate has set for his own research on the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. Now Watergate is in the space gap. Although it is very dangerous, it is also the position closest to the origin of space. A large amount of space energy is restrained by Watergate, and Watergate also began to try to display the Reverse Flying Thunder God Jutsu that he has been studying for a long time. The reason why Watergate constantly seals at a very fast speed is in fact that Watergate is constantly modifying the values and parameters of his ninjutsu through the seals to adjust his ninjutsu. After thinking that his various parameters and values are completely ready, Watergate said the name of his ninjutsu and injected a large amount of his chakra into his hands to activate the ninjutsu. The brilliant blue and white light instantly covered both of Watergate's hands. Watergate suddenly put his hands together, and then slowly opened his palms wrapped in the blue and white light. Although Watergate's palms were slowly opened, the blue and white light that shrouded Watergate's hands gradually separated from Watergate's palms and slowly condensed into a small and solid ball of light in the place where Watergate's 2 palms were opened. Watergate's forehead and cheeks were wet with sweat at the moment, and even his half-long golden hair was stuck to his cheeks at the moment. Watergate's chakra and physical strength are now consumed, but Watergate has no choice but to continue. From the situation of Watergate and Nangongjia passing through the space barrier together, Kagaya is obviously on guard against this kind of behavior that wants to directly travel through space. Although he doesn't know how much strength Nangongjia spent to pass through the space barrier just now, the fatigue in Nangongjia's eyes at the moment has proved that even if Nangongjia deliberately reduces his consumption, passing through the space barrier still brings a lot of pressure to Nangongjia. Of course, Watergate can directly ignore Nangongj's consumption and use all kinds of means to force Nangongjia to pass through the space barrier again and again. Even if Nangongjia has no objection, this will only make Nangongjia directly rely on himself, and his purpose of gathering all forces will be directly ruined. Before, Watergate did want to use some means to cause a certain consumption of Nangongjia, but if he directly makes Nangongjia lose the power to fight, then how can Kagaya deal with him? Moreover, passing through the space barrier again and again, as long as Otsutsuki Kagaya is not a fool, he will definitely notice that something is wrong. In this case, it is even more impossible to make such a stupid move, otherwise it will only drag everyone into a difficult situation. Therefore, Watergate can only give up his original plan, and then he began to use ninjutsu to bring Naruto and Sasuke to his side, so as to ensure that his side strength is relatively intact. The distance between Watergate's palms is getting bigger and bigger, and the bluish-white ball in Watergate's palm is also constantly expanding and began to slowly deform. The bluish-white ball began to extend and transform, and finally, in Watergate's hand, the ball of bluish-white energy directly turned into a kunai similar to the trident flying thunder god. Seeing such a kunai formed in his hand, Watergate's eyes finally showed a trace of relief. After all, as long as such a space kunai can be formed, then his reverse flying thunder god jutsu will be half successful. Watergate held the space kunai condensed with a lot of chakra in his hand, and then directly inserted the space kunai in his hand into the void in front of him. The space kunai was so strangely inserted in the air, as if it was really inserted into something. Watergate opened his palm and placed it on the handle of the space kunai, and a lot of chakra was directly instilled into the space kunai by Watergate. At this moment, Naruto and Sasuke, who were in the ice space and acid space, were suddenly covered by a layer of chakra. The source of this chakra is none other than the flying thunder god imprint that Watergate left on Naruto and Sasuke. Oyaji, Yandame Hokage. Naruto and Sasuke also instantly sensed Watergate's aura from these chakra. Naruto naturally had infinite trust in Watergate, and Sasuke also believed that Watergate, who has always been very wise in such a situation, would never do such a thing. So whether it was Naruto or Sasuke, when their bodies were wrapped by Watergate's chakra, they didn't resist and directly let Watergate's chakra control their bodies. Naruto, Sasuke. Come back. Watergate whispered softly, and it didn't sound like a voice full of confidence when using ninjutsu. Instead, it sounded like a prayer in his tone. Now Watergate is actually gambling that his first reverse flying thunder god jutsu will succeed, gambling that Naruto and Sasuke can gather by his side, gambling that his dangerous move will make Black Zetsu and Otsutsuki Kagaya have no way to detect his plan, and then give them a chance to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya. This was a huge gamble, a gamble that the Watergate was quietly implicated in his heart, a gamble that smashed everything on the balance. Chapter 723. The space kunai, which was inserted by Watergate in the void, suddenly burst into a blue-white light. In such a blue-white light, there was also a colorless but seemingly full of the purest space energy. This space energy was naturally the space energy that Watergate forcibly restrained from the space gap of Heaven's defense by relying on his psychic power. This space energy was also an important safeguard for Watergate to be able to perform reverse flying thunder god jutsu. The space energy was divided into two during the movement process. Under the control of Watergate, the two space energy reformed into spherical energy suspended in the air. These two spherical space energy were the space coordinates and insurance measures set by Watergate for Naruto and Sasuke's return. When performing a space jump, especially a reverse space jump, although the human body was only in the space gap for a very short time, every time the space jump was opened and the space jump was released, the human body would be under extreme pressure. Watergate and Nangongjia had been in contact with space energy several times, and their chakra and internal force were also very strong, so they could stay in the space gap for a long time like this. However, Sasuke and Naruto were different. Although these two children became very powerful for various reasons, the strength of their abilities did not mean that their vision, insight, and adaptability were equally strong. The reverse flying thunder god jutsu that Watergate was now performing could only be regarded as an unfinished product. In order to ensure the safety of Naruto and Sasuke, Watergate naturally had to allocate more power to protect the safety of Naruto and Watergate. The small sphere formed by space energy began to emit small light spots at this moment and merged into the surrounding dark void. All the energy finally condensed to the highest level at this moment, and the space energy sphere was also completely integrated into the unknown void at this moment. Two lights flashed, and the figures of Naruto and Sasuke appeared directly at the original location of the space energy sphere. The blue-white space kunai that was originally inserted into the void by Watergate also dissipated at this moment. Watergate forcibly suppressed his physical fatigue and raised his head to look at Naruto and Sasuke, who he summoned using the reverse flying thunder god jutsu. Naruto's condition was good. Although there was still a little green corrosive liquid on his body and he looked a little tired, overall, he still maintained his combat power at a considerable level. At this moment, Sasuke closed his eyes tightly, as if he was comprehending something. Although it's not very clear what Sasuke comprehended from such a passive space jump, but according to the heavenly hand power that Sasuke used in the previous battle, and Sasuke's own top-notch talent, Watergate believes that Sasuke's comprehension will definitely bring Sasuke great progress. Miyagi, I'll help you restore chakra. The moment Naruto appeared, he saw his father's slightly tired look. Naruto directly walked to Watergate's side and used 6 paths power to purify the violent chakra in Jubi, and directly injected Jubi's pure chakra into Watergate's body to replenish Watergate's consumption. After hearing Naruto's words, Watergate also nodded and accepted the chakra transmission from Naruto. While Naruto was constantly purifying Jubi's chakra and transmitting it into Watergate's body, Sasuke, who still had some icicles on his body, also opened his eyes at this moment, and the 6 tomo in his left eye also rotated quickly. The breath on Sasuke's body was originally erratic, high and low, but after Sasuke opened his eyes and the lines in his eyes stopped rotating, all the breath was retracted back into Sasuke's body. Nangong, sensei. Sasuke slightly clasped his fist and bowed to Nangong. Although his body was a little stiff because of the low temperature and the omnipresent danger in the ice space, Sasuke was still very respectful to Nangong as a disciple. Looking at Sasuke's respectful salute, Nangong also walked directly to Sasuke, stretched out his hand and brushed away some of the frost on Sasuke's body, then held Sasuke's arms and helped Sasuke up. Thank you for your hard work, Sasuke. Nangong put his hand on Sasuke's shoulder and said to Sasuke in a slightly heavy tone, originally, things like saving the crisis should be a matter for me and Watergate. But this time, we are indeed not capable enough, and you and Naruto also coincidentally obtained Rikudo Yang and Rikudo In power from Rikudo Sannin, which became the key to sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya. Although you seem to have just escaped from a dangerous place, I still need to tell you that you are not slacking off yet. Our ultimate goal is to defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya. Nangong and Watergate both hope that Naruto and Sasuke can grow, but Nangong and Watergate's roles are different. Watergate is Naruto's father, so everything that Watergate does to Naruto is from his perspective as a father. That is to say, Watergate is the driving force behind Watergate's words to Naruto. Nangong is Sasuke's sensei. Although the role of sensei is close to a father-like role to some extent, sensei is relatively more rational, so when he speaks, he seems to be more old-fashioned and stiff. Sasuke just wanted to say something, but when his mouth opened slightly, Nangong directly unsheathed the sword in his hand and said to Sasuke, although you and Naruto are the main forces against Otsutsuki Kagaya, I won't let the two of you charge in front while I watch from the sidelines. As your sensei, I will do my best to pave the way for you. Otherwise, the sword in my hand will laugh at me. Hearing Nangong's words, Sasuke abruptly swallowed some of the words he just wanted to say to prove his determination. His sensei is still his sense. Even though Nangong's character has more or less changed over the years, Nangong's unbending kendo will always be the backbone of Nangong's body. Chapter 724. After exchanging a few words with each other, Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja also began to seize the time to restore the energy in their bodies and nourish their spirit. After all, the experience just now has more or less affected the state of the four of them. For the upcoming battle, they must seize every minute and second to maintain their best state. But whether it's Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, they know very well that it's impossible for them to get enough time to recover. Although the four of them were not directly attacked by Kaguya when they entered Heaven's defense, it doesn't mean that Kaguya really thinks that they can rest easy after entering Heaven's defense. Even if Kaguya thinks so, as someone who has been in the shinobi world for many years, he knows the truth that a lion needs to go all out to catch a rabbit. He will definitely pay more attention to the four of them again and again. And once Kaguya finds that the four of them are no longer in the space he arranged for the four of them, it's time for the final battle. In the core of the 6 dimensions of Heaven's defense, the origin sphere, Kaguya was suspended in the center of the space. His long silver-gray hair fell directly to a position lower than the soles of his feet. Although the wide robe on his body covered his body, it also brought endless holiness to Kaguya. A large number of pure chakra constantly appeared in the beginning sphere. This chakra that was absorbed by the sacred tree from the ninjas was all absorbed by Kaguya's body to supplement the missing energy in his body. When Kaguya felt that the energy in his body was infinitely close to saturation, he finally opened his eyes slowly. The milky white pupils were located in the center of his white eyeballs. They were a little strange eyes, but on Kaguya's face, they looked so harmonious. Zetsu, during the time I was absorbing energy, did anything happen? Although the sacred tree fruit affected Kaguya's mind to a certain extent, Kaguya, known as the goddess of Uno, was never a stupid existence. As soon as she woke up, Kaguya began to ask Black Zetsu, who was hiding in his sleeve, about everything that happened during her sleep. Black Zetsu himself is the life evolved from Kaguya's spiritual power, the so-called third sun. Therefore, for Otsutsuki Kaguya, Black Zetsu can be said to be completely dedicated. In the past thousands of years, Black Zetsu may have been a subordinate of different people, but his loyalty will always be left to his mother, Otsutsuki Kaguya. Reporting to Mother, Nangongja and Namikaze Watergate met in the supergravity space. Under the joint efforts of the two, they penetrated the space barrier, and Namikaze Watergate used the space energy in the space gap to cast a ninjutsu that seems to have the opposite effect of the Flying Thunder God Jutsu. He directly pulled Uzumaki Naruto and Uchiha Sasuke out of the acid space and the ice space. Now all four of them are staying in the space gap. It seems that they want to use this short time to restore their strength. After hearing Otsutsuki Kaguya's question, Black Zetsu directly told everything he knew to his mother Otsutsuki Kaguya. If Nangongja or Namikaze Watergate were present, after hearing Black Zetsu's words, they will immediately be stunned, because Black Zetsu's understanding of the situation is too detailed, and it is very likely that even the conversation between them has been heard by Black Zetsu. In fact, such a strange ability is attributed to Black Zetsu's psychic power. Psychic power is invisible, but it has a complete body because of the power of 6 paths and yin-yang release. Such a situation can almost be said to be a miracle. It is precisely because his essence is psychic power. So when Kaguya entered the origin space and began to absorb a lot of chakra, Black Zetsu also absorbed a part of the chakra. However, when absorbing this chakra, Black Zetsu did not directly store this chakra in his body. Instead, he returned this chakra back to the origin space. A large number of chakra, after being processed by Black Zetsu, spread across the 6 major spaces through the connection between the various spaces. In the beginning, the amount of chakra processed by Black Zetsu was still too little, so only a small area could be detected. However, in order to protect the organs in his body, Watergate absorbed a lot of natural energy in the space. This natural energy is naturally mixed with the pure energy that has been processed by Black Zetsu's chakra. This energy is Black Zetsu's eyes and ears. The energy lurking in Watergate's body can't directly cause any threat to Watergate, but it is enough to grasp Watergate's personal movements. This is the reason why Black Zetsu can get all the information about Nangongji's group so easily. After hearing the information stated by Black Zetsu, Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't have the slightest worry in his eyes. He was still like a god. His eyes were full of indifference. Is that so? It seems that Hagoromo's 2 children are not bad, but it's not enough. Since they are children, they should act like a spoiled child. If they go too far, it's natural for me to teach them what is right and what is wrong. As for that Nangongji and Namikaze Minato, these 2 people are really too noisy. Is it because of these 2 people that my 2 grandsons have such a bad attitude towards me, their grandmother? Naruto and Sasuke themselves are the 2 children of Rikudo Sennin, Otsutsuki Azura and Otsutsuki Indra's chakra reincarnation. For Kagaya, Naruto and Sasuke are his own grandchildren. Seeing his 2 grandchildren actually disobeying him like this, Kagaya's mind couldn't help but think of his 2 children, Hagoromo and Himura, joining hands to deal with him and seal him. His originally calm eyes were full of a violent mood at this moment. Chapter 725. Otsutsuki Kagaya is a mother, and a mother with a twisted and extremely possessive personality. When Otsutsuki Kagaya swallowed the chakra fruit, she didn't know whether it was because of the chakra fruit or because of the sudden surge in her strength. Otsutsuki Kagaya's character was greatly distorted. For such a twisted and possessive mother, the biggest pain in her heart was that her 2 children betrayed her and sealed themselves away. However, Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't have any hatred for her 2 children. On the contrary, Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart was still full of deep love for her 2 children, but this love was very twisted. She wanted to tame her 2 children and even take them as her own. Now her 2 children obviously no longer exist in this world, but the faint breath from Sasuke and Naruto still made Otsutsuki Kagaya involuntarily regard them as her own children. And perhaps it's because Naruto and Sasuke are not Hagoromo and Himura, so Otsutsuki Kagaya's hope in her heart is even greater. As long as she can get proof from 2 people like Naruto and Sasuke that she is not an unqualified mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya can also untie a knot in her heart. Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongji are all trying their best to restore their energy in the space gap, and try to rest their spirits as much as possible. But all of a sudden, all 4 of them opened their eyes. The reason why Watergate and Nangongji opened their eyes was that there was a malice that couldn't be ignored at all, which made Nangongji and Watergate shudder. As for Naruto and Sasuke, they also felt a pair of eyes watching them. Although there was a weak malice, most of it was a strong desire that was difficult to suppress, a strong desire to completely occupy something. It's coming. Although the 4 of them felt different gazes, all of them had an instinctive vigilance in their hearts. It was as if they had already sensed in advance that something beyond their control was about to happen, or even was happening right beside them. Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongji, the 4 of them, after all, are the strongest in the world. So after such a kind of vigilance appeared in their hearts, they immediately prepared to disperse to face different dangers in different situations. However, the reactions of Sasuke, Naruto, Watergate, and Nangongji were still a little bit inferior. Suddenly, a huge black hole appeared in the void under the 4 people's feet, like a piece of paper being peeled off, and a strong suction force appeared from the hole, which directly pulled all 4 peoples. Jutsu, Naruto's jutsu, shuttling between the 6 worlds. Otsutsuki Kagaya just waved his hand in the beginning space. Naruto's jutsu directly formed 4 space caves under the feet of Nangongji and the other 3 people, and directly absorbed all 4 of them. After passing through the space tunnel formed by Naruto's jutsu, Nangongji and the other 3 were all transmitted to the beginning space, where Otsutsuki Kagaya was. The barrier formed by the internal force and space energy, which were originally used to keep them safe in the space crack, now became the best defensive measure to offset the impact of the 4 people. The 4 figures fell directly from the sky and smashed on the ground, splashing a lot of dust. Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes looked at the smoke and dust in the sky with a little bit of disgust. Otsutsuki Kagaya gently waved the slightly wide sleeves on his clothes, and a strong wind rushed out directly from the sleeves. After the strong wind rushed out of the sleeves came into contact with the air, the wind became stronger and stronger, and the dust in the sky was directly wiped clean like graffiti on a blackboard. Without the smoke to block his sight, Otsutsuki Kagaya also saw the 4 huge pits on the ground due to the fall from a high altitude. But at this moment, whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, all 4 figures disappeared. What's the point of a mere ant playing such a small trick? Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't feel any anger after seeing Nangongja's group disappear. Instead, he seemed to be laughing at Nangongja's behavior of ants jumping up and down in front of him. Otsutsuki Kagaya closed his eyes slightly, and his hands made a cross-shaped seal, and a large amount of chakra gathered. Byakugan, open. That's right, Otsutsuki Kagaya's milky white eyes aren't any other dojutsu, but it's one of the 3 dojutsu that has a relatively low presence compared to the Rinnegan and Sharingan in the shinobi world, but it's one of the 3 dojutsu that has a large number of people, Byakugan. The Hyuga clan is not the descendant of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, but the descendant of Hagoromo Otsutsuki, the younger brother of Hagoromo Otsutsuki. Hagoromo Otsutsuki inherited the sage's body and the Rinnegan on Otsutsuki Kagaya's forehead, and Otsutsuki Himura inherited the Byakugan in Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes. Although the Hyuga clan's Byakugan seems to be far more useful for reconnaissance than combat, at this moment, the Byakugan in Otsutsuki Kagaya's eyes completely surpasses the existence of Byakugan in the ordinary sense. At the same time, Otsutsuki Kagaya's Byakugan also has an extremely powerful offensive power. Through perfect Byakugan detection, Otsutsuki Kagaya has found Sasuke and Naruto behind him, and on his left and right sides, Watergate and Nangongja each occupied one side, ready to fight with him. With a slight smile on his face, Otsutsuki Kagaya stood on the ground from a suspended state and whispered softly, "It's really a simple trick. Pincer attack left and right to create opportunities for the rear." Naruto and Sasuke's Hagoromo's 6-path Yang and 6-path Yin power are indeed dangerous for me, but you 2 ordinary mortals, do you really think you have the ability to entangle me and create opportunities for Azura and Indra? Chapter 726. Kagaya's voice was getting louder and louder. Originally, it was just a whisper, but now it resounded throughout the origin sphere. Watergate and Nangongja naturally wouldn't do nothing. After seeing that Kagaya had activated Byakugan, Watergate and Nangongja had already rushed out of their hiding positions at the same time. Byakugan itself is the inside eye, clairvoyance eye. Any concealment ability will be useless in front of Byakugan. Moreover, Kagaya's eyes can be said to be the most primitive and most powerful Byakugan. How can he not see through their concealment? Watergate and Nangongja themselves are ninjas with rich combat experience. When they saw that they could no longer hide, Nangongja and Watergate directly launched an attack on Kagaya. Although they lost the advantage of hiding and launching a surprise attack, it is precisely because they have lost their way of retreat that both Watergate and Nangongja have an indomitable momentum. Like 2 sharp knives, Nangongja and Watergate rushed straight towards Kagaya's position. In order to ensure their sprint speed, Watergate only condensed 2 Rasengan in his hands, and Nangongja only filled his sword with sword energy. Nangongja and Watergate intend to fight hand-to-hand with Kagaya. It's a hand-to-hand battle where they exchange injuries and even fight to the death. Perhaps the power of ninjutsu is indeed very great, and the effect is also very brilliant, but the real thing that can really entangle the enemy is the close-range taijutsu. Watergate himself is a ninja who is very good at close combat. Even the Rasengan developed by Watergate himself is not a long-range attack. As for Nangongja, as the head of the Blood Garment Pavilion, which was a sect that cultivated internal energy, he was naturally proficient in close combat. His swordsmanship was exquisite and peerless, and he even had a powerful attack like the sword chi to increase his attack power. Looking at Nangongja and Watergate rushing towards him without fear of death, the power in Kagaya's body also surged. He opened his hands, and 2 gray-brown bone spurs appeared directly in his hands. Kill gray bones. The gray-brown bone spurs appeared directly in Kagaya's palm, but Kagaya didn't directly force these bone spurs out completely, but let these bone spurs still grow in his palm, as if two bone swords emerged from his body. Kagaya didn't pay attention to Nangongzhe, who was rushing towards him with Heaven's disaster sword in his hand. Instead, he directly turned around and rushed directly towards Watergate's position with his unparalleled speed. In the face of a pincer attack, the most effective method was not to directly fight to the death with the obviously stronger side of the two, but to directly defeat the relatively weaker side of the two, so that the so-called pincer attack would no longer exist. Under Otsutsuki Kagaya's calculation, the gray-brown bone spur directly pierced the two Rasengan in Minato's hand. The Rasengan itself is actually a cluster of chakra that is barely stable. Once the internal balance is destroyed or the outside is hit to a certain extent, the Rasengan will directly explode. At this moment, the Rasengan in Minato's hand is mixed with a small amount of Senjutsu chakra, which is close to the Senjutsu, Futon, Rasengan, an inferior version of the Senjutsu, Rasengan. But even if it's an inferior version of the Senjutsu, Rasengan, it still has far more power than an ordinary Rasengan. Minato himself was prepared to use injury for injury or even death to entangle Otsutsuki Kagaya, so when he saw that Otsutsuki Kagaya directly attacked the Rasengan in his hand, Minato also directly accelerated his speed and rushed in the direction of Otsutsuki Kagaya. Both of them were extremely fast. Almost in an instant, they had already arrived in front of each other. According to Minato's judgment, at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya should continue to directly attack the Rasengan with the two gray-brown bone spurs in his hand. After all, in such a close contact, there is no possibility for Kagaya to change his move. At that time, it turned out that Watergate's own expectations were still a little off. Kagaya really changed his move in such a situation. The sharp bone spurs that were originally aimed at the two Rasengan were now aimed directly at Watergate's chest. Even if the two Rasengan were about to attack his chest, Kagaya still didn't seem to retreat. In such a battle, Otsutsuki Kagaya was in an advantageous position. There was no need to take the risk of fighting Minato in such a desperate way, unless Otsutsuki Kagaya himself had something to rely on. Whether it is for Uchiha Obito or Uchiha Madara, after these two people absorbed the Jubi and entered the Six Paths mode, there is no way to cause enough damage to them just by relying on ordinary release techniques. However, energy such as Kenjutsu and Senjutsu chakra can still cause some damage to them, which is why although he doesn't have much Senjutsu chakra in his body, he still extracted a part of Chakra Sage Jutsu and integrated it into his attack. But seeing Kagaya fighting with him, Watergate's heart involuntarily became alert. After integrating a part of chakra into the Rasengan in his hand, barely maintaining the internal balance of the Rasengan, Watergate directly threw the two Rasengan in his hand towards Kagaya's chest. After throwing the two Rasengan in his hand, Minato immediately adjusted his body to avoid Otsutsuki Kagaya's attack. However, the two gray-brown sharp bone spurs still hit Watergate's left arm. At the moment of contact with Watergate's body, a gray aura directly drilled into Watergate's left arm, and this aura was still spreading rapidly. I can't keep this arm. Watergate is a qualified ninja, an excellent ninja, and the most suitable ninja to be a ninja. In the face of difficulties, Watergate directly exerted the courage and decisiveness in his blood to the extreme. Even if there is no abnormality in his left arm that can be seen with the naked eye, Watergate directly took out his kunai and cut off his entire left arm. Chapter 727. After decisively cutting off his left arm, Watergate immediately mobilized the chakra in his body to block all the blood vessels in his wound, so as to prevent his body from bleeding. Seeing Watergate cut off his left arm directly, whether it was Nangongzhe, who was rushing towards Watergate and Kagaya, hoping to help Watergate, or Naruto and Sasuke, who were hiding in the dark, ready to use the Fuinjutsu on Kagaya and Nangongzhe, their eyes were full of shock at this moment. How important are hands for a ninja? Almost the vast majority of ninjutsu require a ninja to use his own hands to make hand seals to guide the chakra to display powerful ninjutsu. Only a few Kekkei Genkai and one-handed ninjutsu can get rid of this shackle. Watergate himself is a ninjutsu-type ninja, Using ninjutsu to coordinate his attack is an effective attack method for Watergate. Holding the trident flying thunder god kunai in his left hand and the Rasengan in his right hand, he can attack and defend. This has always been Watergate's usual attack pattern. But now Watergate directly cut off his left arm. Whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, or Xianxia, they were naturally very shocked. And soon the reality made Naruto, Sasuke, and Xianxia see the benefits of Watergate's decisive behavior. The arm that was cut off by Watergate didn't fall to the ground, but it began to gradually collapse, as if it was weathered and then naturally decayed. One of his arms turned into ashes in an instant. Seeing such a situation, Watergate's heart was full of joy. Fortunately, he was able to cut off his left arm in time, regardless of the sacrifice. Otherwise, if the cold and gray aura that he felt was really transmitted to his body, then would his body directly become like his left arm that has now turned into ashes? After a little sigh in his heart, Xianxia and the other three had a clear understanding of the power of Kagaya's killing the gray bone. Kagaya Otsutsuki, the legendary goddess of Uno, ancestor of chakra. When such an existence did not hide his strength at all and vented his strength to his heart's content, how many people could stop him? In the battle and competition between people, although there is a slight gap between the two sides, as long as a person's spirit is strong enough and a person's will is strong enough, then there is still a possibility of defeating the opponent. But the gap between the two is not just a difference of a few centimeters, but a difference of 1,000 miles. Can one really defeat such an enemy just by relying on spirit and will? Of course, although the situation is very critical, whether it's Watergate, Xianxia, or Naruto and Sasuke, who are hiding in the dark and accumulating power to seal Kagaya Otsutsuki, none of them are the kind of people with weak minds. Even if Kagaya Otsutsuki is indeed powerful and invincible, none of the four people has lost the belief of fighting. Moreover, the four of them didn't have the slightest chance. Naruto and Sasuke's bodies also contained Rikudo Senin's 6 pads Yang Force and Rikudo Senin's 6 pads Yang Force and Rikudo Senin's 6 pads Yang Force. Even if the hope is slim, hope is still hope. Kagaya Otsutsuki attacked Watergate. Watergate hit Kagaya Otsutsuki, didn't avoid Kagaya's attack. Watergate cut off his arm. Although this series of things is a little complicated, in fact, it only took a few breaths. Although Watergate suffered a slight loss, he also blocked Kagaya Otsutsuki's footsteps. At this moment, Xianxia also came to Kagaya Otsutsuki's side with his super speed. Watergate held the trident in his hand, and Xianxia held the sword of catastrophe in his hand. The two people actually launched a siege on Kagaya Otsutsuki. Although it seemed that Otsutsuki Kagaya had a powerful force that could seriously injure or even kill people in an instant, it was a very unwise choice to engage in close combat with him. However, Xianxia and Namikaze Minato still rushed towards Otsutsuki Kagaya with short weapons in their hands. The reason why Watergate and Xianxia did this is actually very simple. Because when Watergate cut off his left arm just now, he cut it off along with his clothes. Otsutsuki Kagaya's mutual killing gray bones has an extremely powerful corrosive and offensive power, but it also has a weakness that is not a weakness. That is, the target of the mutual killing gray bones is actually only a human body or an object with life aura. Once the target doesn't have any breath of life in the body, the gray aura and corrosive power contained in the gray bone will not have any effect. At this moment, Xianxia and Watergate's sword of catastrophe and flying thunder god's trident naturally don't have any breath of life, so this kind of dangerous but very effective attack is the most effective way to fight against Kagaya Otsutsuki's gray bone. As long as they are not hit by the gray bone spears condensed by the gray bone, then they will not be in any life-threatening danger. Watergate constantly used the body flicker technique that doesn't require any hand seals to change his posture, either dodging, blocking, or looking for gaps to attack. Watergate's ability to entangle the enemy to the extreme. Xianxia was holding the sword of catastrophe in his hand, constantly condensing his internal energy and sword chi in it. Once Watergate's strength is insufficient or he encounters an attack that he can't resist, Xianxia will directly take the sword of catastrophe and fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki to buy enough time for Watergate. Over and over again, the two of them really entangled Kagaya Otsutsuki. Every time Kagaya Otsutsuki wanted to break through the pincer attack of Watergate and Nangongzhi, Watergate immediately pushed away and didn't fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki. Instead, he replaced Kagaya with Nangongzhi, who has been accumulating power for a long time, to fight with Kagaya Otsutsuki. After Kagaya Otsutsuki's offensive posture is offset, Watergate will immediately rush forward like a slippery loach, and there is no way to catch him. Watergate and Nangongzhi relied on this method to buy time for Naruto and Sasuke to prepare the Rikudo Yin and Yang power seal. Chapter 728. Mother, we can't be entangled by them like this. Behind us, Naruto and Sasuke are now emitting a strong aura of 6 paths Yin and Yang. They must have learned from Hagoromo that you can only be sealed and can't be defeated. We must not be entangled by them. Black Zetsu, who was hiding in Otsutsuki Kagaya's sleeve, didn't directly participate in the battle, so he directly saw the situation of the entire battlefield and was anxious. Black Zetsu himself is naturally 100% loyal to Otsutsuki Kagaya, but after all, Black Zetsu is a creature with self-consciousness. For so many years, Black Zetsu has been trying his best to revive his mother, Otsutsuki Kagaya, and now, after thousands of years of hard work, he finally resurrected his mother. But at this moment, his mother was entangled by 2 people, and standing behind them, there were 2 people with the power of 6 paths Yin and Yang, ready to seal his mother in the same way. Does he have to go back to the time when he was accumulating power and planning plans? And the reason why he was able to smoothly mix in the ninja world was mainly because he was hiding in the dark. This time, in order to help his mother resurrect, Black Zetsu himself was standing directly under the sun. Once Otsutsuki Kagaya is really sealed, then even if Black Zetsu still has considerable strength, he still can't avoid the fate of being a rat crossing the street in the ninja world. Shut up! How could Otsutsuki Kagaya not know that if he was entangled by Nangongzhi and Watergate at this moment, he would be in a dangerous situation? But at this moment, Nangongzhi and Watergate were almost desperate to delay time here. Even if he wanted to rush out, it would take some time. Whenever he was ready to use a powerful attack to force the 2 people back, Nangongzhi and Watergate would desperately break up his chakra and then cooperate with each other to fight him again. The more Black Zetsu explained the battle situation to him, the more anxious Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart was, and Black Zetsu just said something that should never be said. What I do, I don't need you to tell me what to do. Since you have always regarded yourself as my 3rd son, then remember, Hagoromo and Himura are both your brothers. No matter what they do, they are still my children. It's not your turn to talk nonsense here. For Otsutsuki Kagaya, Hagoromo and Himura are 2 scars in his heart that can never be touched. Although Black Zetsu is indeed loyal enough, after all, Black Zetsu is just a strange existence born from the combination of yin-yang release and spiritual force. How can such a Black Zetsu be compared with Otsutsuki Hagoromo and Otsutsuki Himura in the heart of Otsutsuki Kagaya, who was pregnant with him for 10 months and gave birth? Suddenly hearing Otsutsuki Kagaya's reprimand, Black Zetsu himself didn't react. After all, Otsutsuki Kagaya's attitude towards him was very intimate before. Perhaps it was because of Otsutsuki Kagaya's deliberate show of intimacy that Black Zetsu himself was a little bit complacent and lost his usual exquisite mind. I'm sorry, Mother. I said something wrong, but I still hope that Mother cannot be stingy with consumption now, and use the most powerful and effective attack to directly defeat these 4 people, otherwise, there will be endless trouble. In fact, when Otsutsuki Kagaya opened his mouth and scolded Black Zetsu, he also felt a little regret in his heart. After all, his 2 children obviously no longer exist in the shinobi world, so Black Zetsu, who is hiding in his sleeve at the moment, is the closest person to him. Although his scolding just now can be regarded as somewhat reasonable, but how can the relationship between people be sorted out with a few simple words? Zetsu, I said something wrong just now, don't take it to heart. Otsutsuki Kagaya didn't know what kind of mentality drove him to admit his mistake to Black Zetsu. Otsutsuki Kagaya, who has always been the goddess of Uno, the ancestor of chakra, and other noble identities, is now admitting his mistake and apologizing to others. Mother, you don't have to mind. I know very well that Mother is also very annoyed with the current situation, so no matter what kind of emotions you show, I can understand. Mother doesn't have to mind. Although Black Zetsu's words were very understanding, and his performance was also very generous. However, as a woman, especially a very powerful woman, Otsutsuki Kagaya naturally felt a little estranged from Black Zetsu's seemingly indifferent prophecy. After all, the closest person to me still can't understand each other? Otsutsuki Kagaya sighed softly in his heart, but he still adjusted his mood. What he should consider now is not how to win over others, but to find a way to get out of the quagmire created by Minato and Nangongjia, and then not be sealed by Naruto and Sasuke's powerful Fuinjutsu containing the power of 6 paths yin and yang that they prepared together at this moment. All things in the world turn to nothingness. Expand the truth-seeking ball. The truth-seeking ball itself has the power to release the opposite power of the existence in contact with it, and then disintegrate the other party. However, because the truth-seeking ball itself is relatively small, it is generally only used to offset some ninjutsu. But at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya opened his hands, and the black truth-seeking ball was constantly expanding, as if there was no limit to its expansion. In the end, Otsutsuki Kagaya still listened to Black Zetsu's advice and used such a powerful ninjutsu that will consume a lot of his chakra. In the process of the truth-seeking ball's expansion, Nangongjia and Watergate, who have been wandering around Otsutsuki Kagaya and fighting, were directly forced to retreat. After all, the truth-seeking ball is different from the gray-brown bone spur formed by killing gray bone. The ability of the truth-seeking ball can be used on any substance. Nangongjia and Watergate are naturally not afraid of sacrifice, but Nangongjia and Watergate don't want their sacrifice to be meaningless, so Nangongjia and Watergate stopped attacking Otsutsuki Kagaya almost at the same time and withdrew. Chapter 729. The dark truth-seeking ball was constantly injected with pure and vigorous Jubi chakra, and the truth-seeking ball itself also became larger and larger due to the accumulation of chakra in the body. It slowly grew from the size of a normal tennis ball. In just a few breaths, the truth-seeking ball directly expanded into a huge sphere with a diameter of nearly 3 meters. Kagaya's slender figure was so obvious in comparison to the expanding truth-seeking ball. Although Watergate and Nangongjia themselves have a certain amount of experience and knowledge, Naruto and Sasuke, who have the power of 6 paths and the power of 6 paths in their bodies, can see it more clearly. Behind Naruto, there is also a truth-seeking ball with the same nature as the expanding truth-seeking ball that Kagaya used, but because of the same nature, he can better understand Kagaya's strength. The reason why Naruto can have the truth-seeking ball is mainly because of the small amount of Jubi chakra in his body that was taken by Uchiha Obito from Uchiha Madara's body, and the other part is the power of 6 paths activated in his body by 6 paths Sannin. The power of Jubi chakra and the power of 6 paths complements each other, which allows Naruto to enter such a mode that is similar to 6 paths mode, but is different from Uchiha Obito and Uchiha Madara, who absorbed Jubi and became Jubi column force. At this moment, the person in front of Naruto and Sasuke can be said to be the source of all chakra, Kagaya Otsutsuki. The principle of yin and yang is also clear in Otsutsuki Kagaya's heart. When it comes to the purity of chakra, no one can surpass Otsutsuki Kagaya. Under such conditions, Otsutsuki Kagaya's truth-seeking ball was naturally far beyond the scope of Naruto's understanding and coping with in all aspects. Such a powerful truth-seeking ball, is it really a power that should exist in the world? No one can answer Naruto's words, because at this moment, everyone is not thinking about how to break such a truth-seeking ball, but how to survive under the truth-seeking ball's obliteration. You foolish people! I am the goddess of Uno, Kagaya Otsutsuki. You live in the world, men steal and women prostitute, filthy. For thousands of years, you still attack each other without rest. This land is red because of you, the sky is full of blood. Millions of years ago, I once gave you all a chance and helped you quell the chaos caused by the war between you all. However, up until now, You still don't know how to cherish it. How stupid are you? Since you are so stupid, I will to chaos to eliminate your sins. Kagaya, in her hand, Kagaya. Her lips moved a little, and her voice spread directly throughout the shinobi world. Whether it was the ninjas on the battlefield who were lucky enough not to be illuminated by the blood moon and avoided the attack of the tree, or those who were hiding in their own fortresses and praying that they could successfully pass through this danger, they all heard Otsutsuki Kagaya's voice at this moment. Kagaya is different from Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito. Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito pursued conquest and control the entire shinobi world in their own hands. Even the so-called Eye of the Moon project, in the end, will keep the lives of others, but they will fall into genjutsu and listen to their orders. But what Kagaya clearly showed at this moment is not the so-called conquest, but complete annihilation. Everything in the shinobi world is regarded as a disdainful garbage, and now Kagaya sees himself as a person who will clean up the shinobi world. As for control, thousands of years ago, Kagaya has already done it, and this kind of control is not attractive to Kagaya at all. Kagaya's purpose is to destroy the world? After hearing Kagaya's declaration, Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja were naturally the most emotional people on the battlefield. After all the previous actions of Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito were just to pull everyone in the shinobi world into genjutsu space, and use genjutsu to bind everyone and bring eternal peace to the shinobi world. Although everyone in the 5 great shinobi villages was full of condemnation for their actions and plans, but in essence, their starting point is understandable, but their behavior is indeed a bit extreme. But now, the first sentence of Kagaya's mouth is to directly destroy the world. Conquest and destruction, although sometimes seem to be the same thing, but the mentality is different. What conquest requires is to take control of what you desire in your own hands. The means and attitude can be tough, but at least this thing can't be too damaged, otherwise, how can it be regarded as conquest? Destruction, on the other hand, is pure destruction. The destroyer destroyed everything in sight. It made no difference to the destroyer whether these things were broken into pieces or directly annihilated into dust. We must find a way to stop him. The shinobi world can't be destroyed like this. Whether it is Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, or Nangongja, such a strong voice appeared in their hearts at this moment. Maybe the 4 of them are in different camps, and maybe the 4 of them have different goals, but this shinobi world is an important existence for them to realize each other's demands and wishes. Once the shinobi world no longer exists, then how can their personal demands and wishes be realized? At the same time, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongja all gathered around Naruto at this moment. At this moment, the expanding truth-seeking ball used by Kagaya is essentially the same as the truth-seeking ball that appeared behind Naruto. As long as they can get a certain degree of understanding from Naruto, maybe everyone can really solve the crisis at this moment. Naruto can naturally also perceive the trend and purpose of the other 3 people approaching him, but the more people look forward to it, the more the sadness in Naruto's heart became stronger. Doesn't Naruto want to find a way to solve the crisis as soon as possible? Naruto, who has the truth-seeking ball, thinks more than anyone else, and sees the reality more clearly than anyone else. The power he uses is far less than the truth-seeking ball controlled by Kagaya. As long as chakra exists, it will not be destroyed at all. And Kagaya is obviously inextricably linked to the Jubi and has almost endless chakra. How can such an enemy be defeated? Naruto really can't think of the slightest way. Chapter 730. Naruto. Everyone gathered around Naruto, and after all, Sasuke, who was about the same age as Naruto and had a deep bond with Naruto, was the first to speak to Naruto. But just as Sasuke called out Naruto's name, Naruto shook his head and stopped Sasuke from continuing. There is no way to solve it at all. Naruto opened his eyes, and there was a strong sense of despair in them. For a long time, Naruto has been an extremely optimistic and cheerful person, and he usually encourages everyone. But now, even Naruto, who has a happy personality, has a bit of sadness and despair in his eyes, which is enough to prove how serious the situation has become. Truth-seeking ball is different from some other ninjutsu. Naruto stood in place, glanced at Otsutsuki Kagaya, who was floating in the sky and completely ignored Naruto's group of 4, then looked at the truth-seeking ball floating behind him, and said to Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongjia, the truth-seeking jade itself isn't a real substance. It's a substance that exists between illusion and reality. Although in our eyes, truth-seeking ball is a black sphere. In fact, this is not the appearance of the real truth-seeking ball. The black observed in our eyes is actually the truth-seeking ball's state after it neutralizes and swallows the light around it. With that said, Naruto opened his hand, and one of the several truth-seeking balls floating behind Naruto was controlled by Naruto and came to Naruto's hand. At this moment, the black sphere in Naruto's hand was constantly changing, like a trickle flowing on Naruto's fingertips and palms. The nature of truth-seeking ball itself is not constant. In the hands of the controller, truth-seeking ball can be solid, liquid, or even gas. For the caster, truth-seeking ball is a part of their body and will not cause any harm to themselves. But for other existences, truth-seeking ball is a fatal existence that can directly erase their existence. What Naruto said, in fact, Watergate and the others have already grasped the meaning of truth-seeking ball through the previous battle with Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito, but they were not as specific as what Naruto said, so they still listened patiently, hoping to find a way to fight against Kagaya's truth-seeking ball from Naruto's narration. Although truth-seeking ball itself has extremely strong destructive and defensive power, it also has its own weakness, which is the energy supply. Truth-seeking balls, if it wants ball's energy, it will have to release energy that's as energy will have to be released. The more powerful the neutralization, the more consumes Chaz. But how could such a weakness be considered a weakness for Otsutsuki Kagaya? As long as the supply of Chaz exists, truth-seeking ball will always exist, and we can't do anything about it. When the truth-seeking ball uses its special ability, there is a limit to the amount of energy it can supply. Once the amount of chakra is insufficient, the truth-seeking ball will naturally break through his defense and directly attack his body. In the previous battle with Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito, the reason why Senjutsu Chaz and Sword Chi, which are more condensed than ordinary energy, can break through the defense was because the Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito's truth-seeking ball's ability to neutralize objects wasn't pushed to the extreme. The truth-seeking ball only consumed a part of its energy, and it directly broke through the defense and attacked Uchiha Madara and Uchiha Obito. But such a weakness is not a weakness at all for Kagaya, who is almost as powerful as the Jubi. Using the truth-seeking ball to offset the entire shinobi world is something that Kagaya can do. It's just to wear down a few attacks and wear down a few ninjas who are far inferior to him. For Kagaya, there is no pressure at all. The only weakness that can be targeted is directly made up for by Kagaya's own strength at this moment. What method should the 4 of them use to defeat Kagaya? Everyone's eyebrows were locked. In such a predicament, there was no effective solution for them, so they could only frown here, but they couldn't find a way to deal with Otsutsuki Kagaya. However, just when everyone was at a loss, Nangongjia suddenly stood up from the crowd and said to Naruto, Sasuke, and Watergate, I have a way here that is not a way. Now that everyone is at a loss, suddenly Nangongjia said that he has a way, everyone naturally has no reason not to listen. After the 3 of them nodded, Nangongjia also began to talk about his so-called method to everyone. Indeed, from the perspective of the truth-seeking ball itself, there is no weakness. Even if there is a weakness, Kagaya Otsutsuki relied on his own strength to make up for this weakness. But why don't we pull our thinking out of the confrontation technique? Correct our thinking? Stop thinking about confrontation technique? Although Nangongjia had only said a few words, the people who were present were all sharp-witted and quick to understand. Since it's not confrontation technique itself, then the only thing that can be used to fight is the existence of the caster. In the previous plan, in fact, everyone worked hard with the goal of sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya. But after Kagaya Otsutsuki vowed to destroy the world, Everyone began to think about how to stop Kagaya Otsutsuki from destroying the world, instead of defeating and sealing him. Everyone fell into a misunderstanding. Indeed, no one has a way to fight against the almost perfect truth-seeking ball, but everyone has a way to fight against Kagaya, the 6 paths of yin and yang power in Naruto and Sasuke's body. All the problems finally returned to the original origin again, to defeat Kagaya and bring hope to the shinobi world. It seems that you all understand what I mean. Instead of being entangled here on how to deal with the truth-seeking ball, it's better to concentrate on thinking about how to defeat and seal Otsutsuki Kagaya. Truth-seeking ball is just a ninjutsu, and Kagaya is the root of all the chaos. Looking at the 3 people around him with a look of understanding, Xianxia slowly said to the 3 of them. Chapter 731. The huge chakra in Kagaya's body continued to gather in the huge truth-seeking ball in her hand. Looking at the truth-seeking ball in her hand getting bigger and bigger, Kagaya's heart wasn't as calm and indifferent as when she made the declaration of the destruction of the world. In the final analysis, although Otsutsuki Kagaya's character is very extreme, and sometimes his behavior is very incomprehensible, but Otsutsuki Kagaya himself can also be regarded as a kind person. She loved her children dearly. She loved the world dearly. It is precisely because her love is too deep, so deep that it is difficult to extricate herself, that Kagaya's twisted personality made her do so many seemingly cruel things. But every time she makes a difficult decision, every time she makes a cruel choice, Kagaya's heart is filled with endless sorrow, suffering for her own actions. But even if her heart is very painful and tormented, Kagaya's heart always believes that everything she does is for the sake of this world. May you rest in peace. Kagaya's eyes gently swept across the ground under her feet. After a slight sinking of her heart, she closed her eyes and whispered softly as if praying for the beings that are about to be destroyed by her. As soon as Otsutsuki Kagaya's voice fell, suddenly the sharp sound of the air being torn apart appeared in his ears. His brows furrowed slightly, and his originally pure and holy face was now slightly distorted. Kagaya's personality is very twisted, and the thing that Kagaya can't tolerate the most is that someone dares to disobey her will and do things beyond her plan. In other words, I, the goddess of Uno, Kagaya Otsutsuki, didn't want this world to be ruined by you, so I forced myself to endure the sadness of destroying so many lives and granted you death. Why don't you accept my final mercy? Why do you have to come out and resist? What's there to resist with your current appearance? Just die properly. Kagaya gently pushed her hands, and as if the expanding truth-seeking ball was stuck in the sky, she directly shattered the small sword formed by the chakra that was shot towards her. Xianxia? In the ninja world, there is no one else who can use chakra and pose a threat to her except for Xianxia. Such a so-called internal force practitioner that Otsutsuki Kagaya had never heard of, relied on his own strength to make the ancestor of chakra, Kagaya, remember his name. Black Zetsu was hidden in Kagaya's sleeve. He had been telling all kinds of information to Kagaya, but he didn't know when he started to become silent. Black Zetsu has absolute loyalty to Kagaya from the depths of his soul, but loyalty doesn't mean that Black Zetsu can ignore his ego and be loyal to Kagaya, so Black Zetsu chose to be silent at this moment. Why did Hagoromo and Himura attack Kagaya, who was his mother, and seal her away for such a long time? Kagaya's mother, Kagaya's mother, Kagaya's mother's. Himura and Hagoromo didn't know how many times they used various means to persuade their mother not to regard all the lives in this world as strategic resources for the future war. But time and time again, in exchange for their mother's anger, Kagaya still directly absorbed many people into the chakra tree, turning them into her own energy source, and using them as a blueprint, she transformed a large number of war weapons, white Zetsu. No words can describe the disappointment and anger of Himura and Hagoromo towards their mother. Himura and Hagoromo looked at their mother, who was infinitely loving to them, but at this moment, she was so cold-blooded and ruthless to all living beings, and their hearts were filled with fear and anger towards Kagaya. For the 2 brothers, Kagaya Otsutsuki was no longer just their mother. Before their mother, Kagaya Otsutsuki was a terrible demon who would sacrifice the whole world for her own selfishness at any time and place. Kagaya's cold-bloodedness and ruthlessness not only forced her two children to oppose her, but also pushed Black Setsu further and further away from her. Black Setsu's silence didn't stop Nangong's group of 4 from attacking. Immediately after the sword chi, 9 huge Rasengan containing the tailed beast chakra appeared. Naruto decomposed the turbid Jubi chakra in his body, and directly pushed the Jubi chakra into the respective chakra of the 9-tailed beasts and the power of Geto as a binder. In the 6 paths mode, Naruto directly condensed the golden chakra on his body into a giant golden hand, and condensed the power of Geto, 6 paths, and the respective chakra of the 9-tailed beasts into the Odama Rasengan with the tailed beasts' respective chakra attributes. Uncle Nangong, help me restrict the actions of Kagaya Otsutsuki. Feeling that his 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan containing great power were close to Kagaya Otsutsuki, Naruto suddenly shouted at Nangongja. After hearing Naruto's words, Nangongja, who was constantly accumulating sword chi in his body, burst out. Wisps of sword chi directly emerged from Nangongja's body, and these sword chi quickly condensed into the shape of the sword chi that was condensed before to break through the space barrier. 10,000 swords. Nangongja has never liked to name his moves, and almost all of them are named according to the characteristics of his moves. The simple 10,000 swords made everyone's heart full of shock, because at this moment, there were really countless sword chi swords condensing around Nangongja's body. A large number of sword chi swords under Nangongja's control were constantly flowing in the air like a long river. Compared to the violent destructive power of the sword chi dragon, the torrent of small swords at this moment is undoubtedly more pervasive, and has the effect of killing and trapping the enemy. Even for a moment, the light emitted by the small swords in the torrent of sword chi far exceeded the brilliance of the 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan displayed by Naruto. Chapter 732. The torrent of sword chi went against the flow and rushed directly in the direction of Kagaya. The torrent of sword chi directly wrapped around Kagaya's body like a long river, and the dense sword chi directly wrapped Kagaya's body tightly in it. Quality and quantity have always been difficult to coexist. Nangongja condensed a large amount of sword chi and internal strength to form a small sword, and this huge amount of sword chi torrent naturally had a certain difference. The larger the number, the weaker the power contained in the individual. After Nangongja had confirmed that he had enveloped Kagaya in the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi, Nangongja also passed a look to Uchiha Sasuke, who was preparing on the side. Sasuke immediately understood and condensed his dojutsu, chakra, and the 6 paths of In in his body into his eyes. A flame was condensing in Sasuke's eyes. Rikudo, Mangekyo Dojutsu, Amaterasu. Originally, the Amaterasu flame only used chakra and dojutsu as its own fuel. At this moment, there was a powerful force called the 6 paths of In in it. The higher the level of the burning energy, the greater the power of the Amaterasu flame itself. At this moment, the Amaterasu flame burned with eternal Mangekyo Dojutsu, 6 Tomo Rinnegan Dojutsu, chakra, and the 6 paths of In as fuel. At this moment, it also had a powerful force enough to hurt Kagaya. The torrent of sword chi displayed by Nangongja formed a cage that wrapped Kagaya in it, and the Rikudo Mangekyo Dojutsu, Amaterasu launched by Uchiha Sasuke made up for the possible loopholes in the torrent of sword chi, tightly imprisoning Kagaya in it. The real killing move was the tailed beast Odama Rasengan created by Naruto using the 9-tailed beast's chakra, senjutsu, and the 6 paths of Yang's power. The 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan containing the chakra nature of the 9-tailed beasts were directly suspended in the air under Naruto's control. They were directly connected like planets around the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. The 9-tailed beast Odama Rasengan didn't directly attack Kagaya, who was imprisoned by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. Instead, they floated in the air, constantly revolving around Kagaya, releasing their aura wantonly. Shikak, Nikomata, Isabu, Sun Wukong, King Mu, Rhino Inu, Halcyon, Ox Demon, and Karama. I don't know if you can hear me, but if you can hear me, please work hard to resist. Now, not only are your lives and your consciousness in danger of extinction, but more importantly, even if your consciousness and your life are destroyed, your remaining energy will still be controlled by others, and all of this energy will be used to destroy countless lives. Naruto looked at Kaguya, who was surrounded by the torrent of sword chi, the Amaterasu flame, and the nine-tailed beast chakra, and loudly called out the names of the nine-tailed beasts. The aura of the tailed beast Odama Rasengan was also deliberately released by Naruto. Kaguya, who was wrapped in the torrent of sword chi, naturally also felt the aura of the nine-tailed beasts released by Naruto's Odama Rasengan. Naruto's words were naturally heard by Kaguya. Oh, stupid. It's just a group of chakra. Because of the ability of yin-yang release, it got the so-called body and consciousness. Now that it has returned to the body of the Jubi, the useless consciousness and body have been wiped out at this moment. Azura, do you think that by just relying on your so-called shouting, you can make such energy regain consciousness? Don't be so naive. Although Kaguya was wrapped in the torrent of sword chi, Kaguya's voice still came out of the cage formed by the torrent of sword chi and the Amaterasu flame. Kaguya's voice did not directly prevent Naruto from continuing to shout, and Naruto's voice still continued to drill into Kaguya's ears. Listening to Naruto's shouting, Kaguya, who was a little panicked because he was imprisoned, was completely eliminated at this moment. Kaguya thought that Naruto, Sasuke, Nangongjia, and Watergate would do something threatening after imprisoning him, but just such a useless shout really made Kaguya feel useless. Listening to Uzumaki Naruto's hoarse shouting, Otsutsuki Kaguya's heart was filled with endless ridicule. At that time, the more he listened to Uzumaki Naruto's voice, Kaguya's face began to gradually change. At this moment, in Kaguya's body, it was obvious that 9 different kinds of chakra slowly condensed into a chakra ball, and the chakra ball was swimming in Kaguya's body. Although Kaguya's physical fitness is extremely strong, the various kinds of chakra condensed into a chakra ball, or the power of frost or flame burned Kaguya's meridians, and the damage and pain from the inside of his body was thousands of times stronger than the pain on the surface of his body. In the end, Kaguya still couldn't bear the powerful pain from his body, and a shrill cry like a cuckoo crying blood directly rushed out of the sword chi cage formed by the torrent of sword chi. Hearing Kaguya's almost shrill cry, whether it was Naruto, Sasuke, or Nangongjia, their faces relaxed a bit. In the plan of the 4 people, the only uncontrollable factor is whether Naruto can awaken the will of the 9-tailed beasts with his own strength. Although Naruto has been saying that he can use the Bijou chakra in his body to summon the will of the 9-tailed beasts in Kaguya's body, but Naruto can only vaguely sense it. Whether it is Sasuke, Watergate, Nangongjia, or even Naruto himself, they are very uncertain about this kind of sensing. In fact, in the plan of the 4 people, there is also a second plan to implement if it is difficult to awaken the will of the tailed beasts. However, perhaps it was luck, or the Bijou itself wasn't completely absorbed by Otsutsuki Kaguya. Naruto awakened the 9 Bijou's will again, which directly crippled Otsutsuki Kaguya's ability. Chapter 733. Otsutsuki Kaguya's chakra riot, which was beyond his expectation, directly appeared in his body. Otsutsuki Kaguya's own powerful strength itself comes from the almost endless chakra in his body and his physique far beyond that of ordinary people. Now the chakra in his body that belonged to the 9-tailed beasts suddenly rioted, almost simultaneously affecting Kaguya's own 2 major advantages and suppressing Kaguya's own strength, reducing the strength gap between Kaguya and Naruto, Sasuke, Watergate, and Nangongjia, giving the 4 people a greater possibility of winning. After Nangongjia and Sasuke looked at each other, the 2 directly removed their control of the sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame. The sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame lost their energy supply and gradually disappeared in the air. Kaguya, who was originally in the cage built by the sword chi cage and the Amaterasu flame, lost his shackles at this moment. Not only did he not directly jump out like a trapped dragon, but he directly fell from the sky as if he had lost his support. Kagaya himself had the ability to float in the air almost instinctively, but at this moment, Kagaya fell directly to the ground like a feather falling from the sky. His painful and mournful scream echoed in everyone's ears, but no one had the slightest pity in their hearts. Since they have already stood on the opposite side of each other, forgiveness is the most irresponsible way of doing things. What they should do now is to do their best to exert their most powerful strength and completely defeat Otsutsuki Kagaya without any room for resistance. Minato, who had not moved and disappeared, suddenly appeared above Otsutsuki Kagaya. In the first sword energy sword that Xianxia released towards Otsutsuki Kagaya before, it actually contained Minato's chakra. After Otsutsuki Kagaya directly stretched out his hand and shattered such a sword energy sword, it was actually equivalent to Minato's flying thunder god imprint on his body that doesn't have a long time. After coming to the side of Kagaya, who was constantly falling from the air, Watergate did not use any ninjutsu, but used chakra to greatly increase his physical strength. One of his hands turned into a hand blade, and a huge force was contained in it. Watergate directly chopped his own hand blade towards Kagaya's neck. Whether it's an ordinary ninja or Otsutsuki Kagaya, the ancestor of chakra, although their destructive power, resistance to ninjutsu, and other aspects are different, but ninjas are at a relative disadvantage when it comes to tempering their body because of their excessive pursuit of attack power. At this moment, because of the chakra in his body, Kagaya's control of his body has naturally been reduced to an extremely weak level. Now Kagaya watched Watergate attack him like this. Even if Kagaya has tried his best to adjust his body so that he can avoid Watergate's attack, but after all, he is not as flexible as Watergate. The hand blade containing a huge force directly chopped on Kagaya's neck. "You bastard! How dare you attack my mother?" Although Black Zetsu complained about Kagaya's previous reprimand, the trivial complaint can't offset Black Zetsu's almost instinctive loyalty to Kagaya. Seeing his mother being directly attacked by Watergate, Black Zetsu's consciousness seems to have fallen into a coma. This situation naturally made Black Zetsu unable to continue to sit down, and directly rushed out of Kagaya's sleeve. His black body has been completely distorted at this moment, like a black tentacle rushing directly towards Watergate's body. Since Xianxia and the others can cooperate so closely, they can directly stun Kagaya. Then this strange existence hidden in Kagaya's sleeve will naturally not be ignored by Xianxia and the others. Watergate looked at Black Zetsu rushing towards him and immediately took out a scroll from his arms. When discussing the content of the battle just now, everyone was quite helpless when mentioning Black Zetsu, but they can't directly destroy Black Zetsu, but they can also directly use a seal to seal Black Zetsu. Watergate extracted a part of Naruto's chakra with the characteristics of the Uzumaki clan and injected it into a scroll he carried with him. With his own will as the brush and Naruto's chakra as the ink, Watergate directly drew a temporary seal with the characteristics of the 4 symbols seal and the 8 trigrams seal on the scroll. Watergate saw the trajectory of Black Zetsu's attack and directly pulled the scroll in his hand. The open scroll in Watergate's hand was constantly dancing like a ribbon. The scroll was constantly dancing. Watergate also hoped to touch a part of Black Zetsu's body with the movement of the scroll. As long as he can touch Black Zetsu's body, the seal engraved in the scroll by Watergate will directly exert its power and seal Black Zetsu in it. Although Black Zetsu knows that Watergate wants to use the scroll in his hand to deal with him, but at this moment, in order to protect his mother, he can't retreat at all. Therefore, Black Zetsu can only directly attack Watergate despite knowing that there is danger in front of him. Most of Black Zetsu's efforts have been spent on planning various plans over the years, and naturally, he has less time to hone his strength. Moreover, Black Zetsu himself is different from ordinary humans. The chakra in his body and his physical strength are weaker than ordinary people, so compared to Watergate, Black Zetsu's strength is still much weaker. After several deliberate moves by Watergate, Black Zetsu's body was directly touched by the scroll in Watergate's hand. At the moment when the scroll touched Black Zetsu's body, the text in the scroll in Watergate's hand was constantly surging as if it was alive. The chakra that Naruto poured into the scroll was directly stimulated, and the chakra with the characteristics of Uzumaki directly condensed into a thick chakra chain under the stimulation of the sealing technique. This is the sealing technique that only Uzumaki clansmen can use, King Kong Seal. Watergate is the husband of Uzumaki Shina Kushina. Although he himself doesn't have the special chakra of Uzumaki clan, he has also learned how to use the King Kong Seal. At this moment, with the help of Naruto's chakra and sealing technique, he can display such a powerful ninjutsu that is close to Kekkei Genkai. Chapter 734. Layers of King Kong chains directly wrapped around Black Zetsu's body, directly wrapping Black Zetsu's twisted body tightly. Even if Black Zetsu constantly changed his posture, those King Kong chains were still tightly wrapped around Black Zetsu like maggots in tarsal bones, unable to move at all. No dash. No dash. No dash. Black Zetsu could clearly feel that his body was constantly being invaded by chakra in the King Kong chains, and his body was constantly being controlled. Even if Black Zetsu struggled with all his strength, he still couldn't break free from the shackles of the King Kong chains. Black Zetsu's body was constantly pulled into the seal scroll, and his body turned into black characters, which were directly sealed in the scroll. Black Zetsu's cry full of fear and struggle came to an abrupt end at the moment when Black Zetsu was completely sealed in the scroll. After seeing that Black Zetsu was completely absorbed into the seal scroll, Watergate also quickly closed the scroll directly. After all, this seal scroll was not a carefully made scroll with long-term effect. The seal text on it was very fragile. Once it was destroyed, its effect would be eliminated. Seeing Otsutsuki Kagaya's last barrier, Black Zetsu was directly sealed. Naruto and Sasuke, who had been preparing on the side, also began to act at this moment. Mobilizing the 6 paths of yin and yang power in their bodies to the extreme, Naruto and Sasuke represented the 2 extremes of yin and yang power in the world at this moment. They repelled each other but also attracted each other. An indescribably powerful fluctuation spread directly between Naruto and Sasuke. At this moment, Naruto and Sasuke directly rose from the ground as if they had escaped from gravity. Naruto and Sasuke directly hit their fists on the left and right sides of Otsutsuki Kagaya. The 6 paths of yin and yang power in their bodies invaded Otsutsuki Kagaya's body almost instantaneously. After the 6 paths of yang power released by Naruto entered Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, it immediately pulled the yin attribute chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The yin power released by Sasuke pulled all the yang attribute chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. The power in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body was undoubtedly huge. The yin and yang power released by Naruto and Sasuke was actually equivalent to opening a dam in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, which was almost leakless body, so that Otsutsuki Kagaya's dam, which stored a large amount of chakra, directly broke at this moment. With a little guidance of their yin and yang power, they directly pulled all the huge chakra out of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. After a large number of chakra was pulled into the air, it began to evolve into a variety of strange scenes. But the most amazing thing was that a large number of yin and yang chakra automatically gathered together at this moment, forming a huge unknown Buddha statue. Red gold and blue purple formed such a huge Buddha statue. The position of Naruto and Sasuke just corresponded to the tightly closed hands of the Buddha statue, and Otsutsuki Kagaya just happened to be in the hands of Naruto and Sasuke. Rikudo, Chibaku Tensei? Although Naruto and Sasuke didn't discuss it in advance, they said the name of this move in unison. These chakra extracted from Otsutsuki Kagaya's body were directly controlled by the yin and yang power of 6 paths in Naruto and Sasuke's body, and attacked their original master, Otsutsuki Kagaya. The powerful squeezing force directly acted on Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, and a black sphere appeared uncontrollably inside Otsutsuki Kagaya's body at this moment. Unlike the black of truth-seeking ball that swallowed light, the black sphere that appeared in Otsutsuki Kagaya's body at this moment was closer to a pure black. The yin and yang power of 6 paths in Naruto and Sasuke's body turned into a thin film on this black sphere, so that this black sphere would not be swallowed by Otsutsuki Kagaya, and it could continue to play its role. The black sphere was naturally the core of Chibaku Tensei's gravity. Because of the yin and yang power of 6 paths, the gravity undoubtedly became stronger, and all the gravity was emitted from Otsutsuki Kagaya's body, so naturally, Otsutsuki Kagaya had no room to escape. Perceiving that the black sphere had already played its power, Naruto and Sasuke also quickly took Nangongja and Watergate out of the attack range of Rikudo Tensei to prevent themselves from being affected. Huge pieces of stone, soil, trees, and many other debris that were absorbed by Nangongja's group were attracted by the powerful gravity of Otsutsuki Kagaya's body and constantly gathered on Otsutsuki Kagaya's body. These stones, soil, trees, and debris themselves were very ordinary substances, but at this moment, the huge Buddha statue in the air was constantly extracting its own power and injecting it into these existences, increasing their strength and making them difficult to destroy. Stones, soil, trees, and debris wrapped Otsutsuki Kagaya layer by layer. Although the number of layers of wrapping increased, the huge Buddha statue in the air also became fainter and fainter. When the Buddha statue's shadow had faded to a certain extent, the attraction of Rikudo Tensei to other existences seemed to be deliberately suppressed and became extremely weak. At this moment, the huge dual-colored Buddha statue seemed to have its own consciousness. It took a deep look at the huge sphere in front of it with pity and many indescribable emotions in its eyes. It opened its palms and held it under the sphere formed by the 6 paths, Chibaku Tensei. With just a gentle push, the sphere flew directly into the air, passing through the space barrier of the origin sphere. The huge sphere came to the real world, and on the way, it seemed to be constantly absorbing all kinds of substances, and its body size became bigger and bigger. After thousands of years of planning and hatred, at this moment, Otsutsuki Kagaya was sealed again as an ending. It was quite emotional to talk about it. Perhaps if Otsutsuki Kagaya wasn't so powerful and didn't swallow the chakra fruit, with Otsutsuki Kagaya's deep love for his child, he could have a simple, happy, and beautiful life. He didn't have to experience betrayal, and he didn't have to be directly submerged in the torrent of history. But there are no ifs, everything that has happened can't be changed, and the only thing that can be changed is the unknown future. And the ones who create the future are Naruto, Watergate, Sasuke, and Nangongja, who are standing on the battlefield at this moment. Chapter 735. Among the 4 of them, perhaps only Naruto didn't quite understand the current situation. He had been looking at his father, Watergate, and Nangongja and Sasuke with a slightly puzzled look. Although Naruto wasn't so proficient in politics, Naruto wasn't a fool either. At this moment, although the atmosphere between Watergate and Nangongja was obscure, Naruto could still fully recognize it. Watergate looked at Nangongja. Although his expression was serious, his face still maintained a gentle expression as he said to Nangongja, "Nangong-sama, thank you for standing up for the survival of the shinobi world and fighting for the entire shinobi world. In this war, whether it is our 5 great shinobi villages or your Bloodcloak Pavilion, we have suffered great casualties. After our 5 great shinobi villages have reorganized, we will invite you to join us for a post-war meeting to discuss a charter to make up for our losses." Watergate's words were sincere, and it can be regarded as giving up part of the 5 great shinobi villages' detached attitude towards the entire shinobi world. Originally, this meeting would only take place between the 5 great shinobi villages, but Watergate actually began to invite Nangongja to join. This was undoubtedly telling Nangongja that the 5 great shinobi villages have recognized that the Bloodcloak Pavilion is already a powerful force on par with them. As long as you are willing to take a step back now, then the Bloodcloak Pavilion will become the 6th force in the shinobi world, and together with the 5 great shinobi villages, they will control the entire shinobi world. Is such a condition tempting? Of course, it is very tempting. If all the conditions mentioned by Watergate can really be achieved, then Nangongja will definitely agree to Watergate's proposal. But can Watergate's words really become a reality? Redistributing the huge cake that has already been divided, and letting the 5 great ninja villages dig out a part of the cake that has already been swallowed and give it to others to eat. How can such a thing be discussed in a meeting like the so-called Minato Shinobi? And from the perspective of the 5 great shinobi villages, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's participation in the war is actually after the 5 great shinobi villages have suffered a lot of losses and withstood part of the Akatsuki's attack. To a certain extent, such participation is also taking advantage of the 5 great shinobi villages. The 5 great shinobi villages will not tolerate such a force trying to take advantage of their own interests. In the end, wealth is tempting. Interests make people's hearts are hard to settle. It is too difficult to make the 5 great shinobi villages give up. Unless Nangongja can show his own powerful strength that the 5 great shinobi villages can't resist, and let the 5 great shinobi villages understand that dividing the benefits is a suitable choice, so that they can swallow the benefits that are in their mouths. 4th Sama, the 4 shinobi. Do you think shinobi, T? I can believe you because your character is well known. But I am not only myself, I am also the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. I believe that I am only putting myself at risk, but as the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, I believe that you are putting all the members of the Blood Cloak Pavilion on a scale. Your character and credibility can make 1 person, 2 people, or even 10 or 20 people willing to risk their lives to believe in you, but do you think that your credibility is more precious than the lives of hundreds of people? Nangongja's words were actually very harsh. Watergate, who was standing opposite to Nangongja, heard Nangongja's words and his heart sank. He was indeed talking to Nangongja based on Nangongja's understanding of his character, but now Nangongja didn't represent his own interests, but the interests of the entire Blood Cloak Pavilion. If it was Watergate himself, he also wouldn't put such important interests on 1 person's character. Is this battle between us really unavoidable? Watergate looked at Nangongja standing opposite him with an indescribable expression. Whether from a public or private point of view, Watergate didn't want the 5 great shinobi villages to have to fight with the Blood Cloak Pavilion again after the battle with Uchiha Madara, Uchiha Obito, and Otsutsuki Kagaya. The 5 great shinobi villages really couldn't afford such a loss. But as Nangongja just said, Watergate was also very clear that if the Blood Cloak Pavilion really wanted to be on par with the 5 great shinobi villages, they must show their muscles well and let the 5 great shinobi villages understand the power of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Otherwise, even if the Blood Cloak Pavilion could really win a part of the benefits with his help, in the end, this piece of meat in their mouths may be directly pulled out of their mouths. It's not us, but the Blood Cloak Pavilion and this old world have to fight, otherwise, the Blood Cloak Pavilion will have no room to survive. What does war mean? The most eye-catching thing is the flow of blood and the loss of life. Although Nangongja has experienced large and small wars, and the lives in his hands are more than hundreds of thousands, but with the increase of age and the accumulation of experience, Nangongja more and more hoped that he could solve the problem as much as possible through some more gentle means. However, the world will not change because of 1 person's will, and the reality still forced Nangongja to take the lives of people over and over again. Now, Nangongja still has to fight. Because Nangongja is the head of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Nangongja has to fight for the future of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Sasuke, let's go! After Sasuke heard Nangongja's words, the 6-tomo Rinnegan in his eyes quickly rotated, directly creating a passage connecting the origin sphere and the real world. Nangongja took out a blood-colored jade pendant from his bosom. He clenched his fist and shattered the jade pendant. A blood-colored light shot up into the sky from the jade pendant's fragments. When the Blood Cloth Pavilion disciples who were still able to move on the battlefield saw the light beam, they all took the injured Blood Cloth Pavilion disciples who could not move on their own and left in a certain direction as if they had planned this beforehand. Sasuke also left with Nangongja. Naruto stood beside Watergate and watched Nangongja and Sasuke leave together. Originally, Naruto wanted to rush forward and directly ask Sasuke and his uncle Nangong why they had to fight. However, he was stopped by Watergate. When the blood in his head subsided a little, Naruto also understood that there was no way to persuade his father or uncle. He could only watch them lead their men to fight. He was clearly a savior who had just saved the entire world, but now he was still so powerless. Chapter 736. Naruto could only helplessly watch everything happen in front of him. He thought that as long as he defeated Otsutsuki Kagaya, there would be no more wars in the ninja world. But now it seems that Naruto thought too much, because as long as a person's heart still has selfish desires, then the war will never end. Is it really impossible for people to understand each other, and can only achieve their goals by harming each other through war? Naruto couldn't find the answer, and could only be held by his father, Watergate Namikaze, to use the Flying Thunder God Jutsu to leave the defense of heaven that was about to collapse. After leaving the heaven's defense, space, Nangongjia and Sasuke immediately headed directly to the previously scheduled location without stopping. When Nangongjia and Sasuke arrived at the designated location, the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion had also gathered. Seeing that nearly 1/3 of the Blood Robe Pavilion disciples had been reduced, Nangongjia's eyes became uncontrollably wet. Nangongjia didn't hide the sadness in his heart at the moment, but directly showed all his sadness. The disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion looked at their leader, who had always been serious and even a little bit cold, at this moment, showing such emotions, and everyone's heart was also full of sadness. Looking at the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion around him, Nangongjia cupped his hands and saluted everyone, then said to the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, "Everyone, I, Nangongjia, have let you all down. If I had been stronger, I might have been able to end this war earlier and lessen our losses a little. Today, so many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion have been reduced, it's really my fault. I'm really sorry, everyone." With that, Nangongjia cupped his hands and bowed deeply to everyone. "You don't have to do this, leader. We all know that our sacrifice now is for the future, leader. You don't have to blame yourself so much. Our dead brothers will never blame the leader. We all know that the leader has done a lot for us, and has done a lot of things that he didn't want to do. We are sorry for the leader." Sasuke stood to the side, watching the various performances of Nangongjia and the many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. His face was still cold as he watched from the side, as if he was coldly observing everyone. There was no doubt that Uchiha Sasuke was firmly on the side of Nangongjia for various reasons. But it wasn't the Blood Robe Pavilion that convinced Sasuke, but only Nangongjia. Sasuke didn't have any feelings for the Blood Robe Pavilion. Obviously, Nangongjia was trying his best to win people's hearts before the war. Sasuke didn't have any rejection or resistance to this approach. He just watched Nangongjia flexibly display various techniques. Although Sasuke didn't want to learn and use such techniques, Sasuke believed that he should understand such means. Otherwise, if he encountered such a situation in the future, he might not have the means to deal with it. After a few words from Nangongjia, the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion also became excited and full of fighting spirit. Seeing that the morale of the disciples was high, Nangongjia finally pulled out the sword hanging on his waist and directly inserted it into the ground in front of him. The power of nature, internal strength, and sword energy poured into the sword. These energies constantly impacted the space, connecting the passage between the ninja world and the Lion Clan's different space. There were some geniuses of the Blood Robe Pavilion hidden in the Lion Clan's different space before the war, as well as some of their family members who had no fighting ability. There was also an elite team belonging to the Blood Robe Pavilion, acting as the last force to protect the families of the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. Although it was only a small team, it was actually composed of the top fighters of the Blood Robe Pavilion. When such a team was selected, none of the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion fought for such a place that didn't directly participate in the war. Because at this moment, everyone broke out with an extremely strong sense of fairness. The 120 people in the team were recommended by many disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, and they were powerful existences with great potential in the Blood Robe Pavilion. Now, Nangongjia opened the door connecting the Lion Clan's different space to the ninja world in order to summon such a powerful backup force. He wanted to compete with the ninja coalition formed by the 5 major ninja villages, which had already been defeated by Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and Otsutsuki Kagaya. He wanted to win a place for internal strength cultivators in the ninja world. Nangongjia's plan was basically clear to the high-level disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion, and some low-level disciples also knew a little about it. Nangongzhi wasn't worried that his plan would be intercepted by the 5 major ninja villages, because the Blood Robe Pavilion was an organization that was too independent of the ninja world. Ninjas were existences who cultivated chakra, while the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion cultivated internal strength. The two types of energy can be said to be fundamentally different. In order to climb to a high position in the Blood Robe Pavilion, the most important condition was the level of internal strength. Such a request undoubtedly allowed the Blood Garment Pavilion to grasp all of its power tightly in its hands. Thousands of years of seclusion had not only filled the disciples of the Blood Garment Pavilion with an enterprising spirit, but also an extremely strong sense of exclusion. It was almost impossible to win over the high-level disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion. After seeing Nangongzhi establish a space channel and summon them, the elite team of 120 people left the Lion Clan's different space and directly came to the ninja world. Supreme Sama. Everyone please rise. After seeing Nangongzhi, all the members of the team directly knelt on the ground and saluted to Nangongzhi. After Nangongzhi returned the salute, the elite team of the Lion Clan's different space began to look around at the remaining disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion outside. Many of the members of the elite team looked at their surroundings with disappointment, sadness, and anger. Many of their family members and friends were left behind in the outside world. After all, it was impossible for everyone in a family to be strong enough to meet the requirements. When they saw that their families and friends were gone, everyone understood that they had sacrificed themselves. Everyone was ready to sacrifice themselves, but their families and friends left them like this, which was quite difficult for the disciples of the Blood Robe Pavilion to accept. Chapter 737. While the Blood Garment Pavilion was preparing their troops and summoning all the forces they could muster, Shui men naturally wouldn't just stand there and do nothing. Forcibly suppressing the fatigue after the fierce battle with Otsutsuki Kagaya, Watergate traced the marks left by Orochimaru and Tsunade, and found the two who had not participated in the battle in the middle of the battle. They were more like bystanders. Orochimaru-sama. Tsunatsuma. Although he was already the supreme leader of Woodleaf Village, the two people standing in front of him were his sensei, Jiraiya's teammates. So whether it was from the position of the Sannin or for his own seniority, Watergate was very respectful to address them as Sama. Even if Orochimaru was still a traitor of Woodleaf Ninja Village. Yandame-sama, you don't have to be so polite. I'm just a traitor of Woodleaf. The crimes of that year will not be erased in any case. A traitor for a day, a traitor for a lifetime. Now I'm just a traitor of Woodleaf. You don't have to be so polite to a traitor, do you? Orochimaru looked at Minato with a smile on his face. As if he was judging other people, he put a layer of sin on himself. Standing on the side, Tsunade looked at Orochimaru and Watergate, and suddenly felt that she didn't quite understand what was going on with them. As the granddaughter of Woodleaf First Hokage and Second Hokage, although Tsunade was not fully exposed to politics, she had a certain understanding of some political tactics and means. Since Watergate directly addressed Orochimaru as Sama, just now, it naturally represents Watergate's goodwill to Orochimaru. As long as Orochimaru can go with the flow, Watergate can use his own means to whitewash Orochimaru, and even take advantage of such an opportunity to push Orochimaru to a very high position. From then on, Orochimaru will no longer be a traitor of Woodleaf in the ninja world, but the backbone of his own ninja village. After experiencing this period of time with Orochimaru, Tsunade could clearly sense that Orochimaru's previous madness and paranoia seemed to have weakened a lot, and his whole person became wise and far-sighted. This kind of wise and calm Orochimaru was actually the original Orochimaru in Tsunade's impression. Tsunade wasn't very clear about what kind of thoughts Orochimaru had in his heart, but thinking about it from her perspective, Tsunade felt that Orochimaru was actually eager to return to Woodleaf at this moment. But clearly now that there was a way down, why did Orochimaru himself want to tear down the steps that Watergate deliberately built for him? To himself? Seeing Orochimaru's actions, Tsunade was just about to stand up and explain Orochimaru's behavior to Watergate and fight for the opportunity for Orochimaru to return to Woodleaf Village. But a figure came out of the cave where Orochimaru and Tsunade were hiding and put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder. Tsunade's personality was well known. In the entire ninja world, there was only one person who could put his hand on Tsunade's shoulder and not let her directly explode. That person was Yondaime Hokage, Watergate's master, Jiraiya. Seeing Jiraiya put his hand on her shoulder, Tsunade also instinctively looked at Jiraiya's face. The battle just now made Jiraiya's body extremely tired, but Jiraiya's eyes were not cloudy. Instead, they were somewhat bright. Jiraiya shook his head at Tsunade. Obviously, he wanted to stop Tsunade from saying anything more. If there was anyone in the world who understood Orochimaru, then this person must be Jiraiya. Although he wasn't very clear about what Orochimaru was thinking at this moment, Orochimaru definitely wouldn't say this just to argue with Watergate. After Watergate became Hokage, Jiraiya already knew that Watergate could no longer be the original cheerful, sunny, and extremely gentle Watergate. After all, apart from the benefits that power brought, it also brought with it tremendous pressure and erosion. Although Jiraiya wasn't very clear about Orochimaru's plan at this moment, Jiraiya could still guess Watergate's plan. After the battle with Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and Otsutsuki Kagaya, the 5 major ninja villages suffered heavy losses, but relatively speaking, Woodleaf Village's strength loss was not so great. Now that Orochimaru was in a state of communication, Watergate would naturally try his best to pull Orochimaru into his camp. A Kage-level powerhouse can be said to be a mainstay for a ninja village. Once an existence like Orochimaru with enough deterrence returns to Woodleaf, Woodleaf will have more initiative in the future situation. Watergate can forgive Orochimaru's past sins, and his behavior of bringing Orochimaru back to the ninja village under pressure will also make Orochimaru completely labeled as Hokage. As long as Watergate's ambition in his heart reaches the point where it's difficult to suppress, then Watergate can directly conquer the other 4 ninja villages with the powerful strength of Woodleaf Village. After all, unlike the other ninja villages who almost came out of their nest, Woodleaf Village still left a considerable number of ninja in their own ninja village as a reserve force. In any case, Orochimaru-sama, you have made a lot of contributions to Woodleaf, but since ancient times, the flaws can't obscure the jade, and I should respect you enough. Since you insist on bearing the burden of your sins, I naturally won't say anything more. But what we need to do now is not to settle old accounts. The war is still not over. Watergate didn't want to entangle too much with Orochimaru. After all, his sensei and his wife were standing here at the moment, and with their relationship with Orochimaru, they will definitely do their best to bring Orochimaru back to Woodleaf Village. Watergate said these words here at the moment to send a signal to his sensei and his wife. Now that his sensei and his wife obviously understood what he wanted to express, Watergate naturally didn't need to entangle too much with such things, and directly said the real reason why he came here. Chapter 738. The war is not over yet? After hearing such news, Tsunade and Jiraiya's eyes were full of disbelief. The 5 great ninja villages united against the Akatsuki organization this time. Although they won now, each of them suffered heavy losses. Moreover, almost every leader of the 5 great shinobi villages has suffered different degrees of injuries. How crazy are they to directly disregard their own existence and continue the war that should have been over? Orochimaru stood on the side, and when he heard the news from Watergate, he still looked calm, and even had a "I knew it" expression in the depths of his eyes. Although Orochimaru wasn't so clear about Sasuke and Nangong's plan, Orochimaru also carefully investigated the situation of internal force cultivators after discovering that Nangongja was an internal force cultivator who was very different from ordinary ninja. It was once glorious, and even at a certain time in history, internal force cultivators even surpassed the mainstream existence of ninja in the ninja world. As an internal force cultivator, when he understood that he had such a golden age, but now he could only curl up and hide in the corner of the ninja world, The unwillingness and ambition in his heart burst out and couldn't be suppressed. This is the human heart. So after hearing the news that the war was not over, Orochimaru immediately put such information on Nangonja and Sasuke. On the other side, Watergate also told Tsunade and Jiraiya about his conversation with Nangonja after cooperating with Naruto and Sasuke to seal Otsutsuki Kagaya, and some of his own predictions. It turned out that Nangonja and Sasuke led the Blood Cloak Pavilion to declare war on our 5 great ninja villages. Jiraiya didn't know why, but when he first heard that the war would continue, the anger in his heart almost accumulated to the limit. But after listening to the conversation between Watergate and Nangonja, the anger in Jiraiya's heart involuntarily reduced a lot. Watergate and Nangonja weren't wrong. What was wrong was their respective standpoints. As the head of the blood-robed pavilion, Nangonja was responsible for all the disciples in the blood-robed pavilion. Watergate, as the Hokage of the Woodleaf Village, is responsible for the many ninjas in the entire Woodleaf Village. Their positions made it impossible for them to trust each other. Since they couldn't trust each other, they could only use the most primitive method, war, to fight for enough benefits for themselves. Standing at the entrance of the cave, Jiraiya, Tsunade, Orochimaru, Watergate, and Naruto stood there, and no one spoke. Just as everyone remained silent, 3 figures walked out of the cave. Tsurumi Mei, Gaara, and AI came out of the cave together. That's right, although Orochimaru and Tsunade didn't participate in the battle for a long time, the 2 of them gathered all the people who were injured in the battle together for treatment. The power of the outer path that invaded the bodies of these 3 Kage because of the previous battle was also eliminated by the joint efforts of Orochimaru and Tsunade after the caster was defeated. Except for Inoki, who was seriously injured and needed some time to recuperate, the other 3 Kage's bodies were almost fine. Everyone, why are you in such low spirits? Looking at the silent 5 people, Tsurumi Mei looked at them and said, "Every ninja is ready to sacrifice when they become a ninja. Since the blood-robed pavilion wants to fight with us, what's the harm in fighting again? As a ninja, we have never been afraid of fighting." Although Tsurumi Mei was a female ninja, she was born in the Blood Mist village. In the Blood Mist era, Tsurumi Mei was already an outstanding existence among many young ninjas. When it comes to wisdom, even many male ninjas can't compare to Tsurumi Mei. After hearing the words of the 5th Mizukage, Gaara and AI, who were standing behind Tsurumi Mei, also nodded. Obviously, the 3 of them also reached a certain consensus after hearing the information provided by Watergate inside the cave. In that case, let's get rid of the ninjas who contacted their villages and gather again to prepare for the final battle. Looking at the 3 of them, Watergate cupped his hand and said to them. After hearing Watergate's words, the 3 of them didn't hesitate and directly went outside the cave. Each of them used their own means to order their ninjas to gather. After being ravaged by the ninjutsu released by many powerful ninjas, the originally flat plain has become bumpy at this moment. On this bumpy plain, broken bodies and streams of blood can be seen with the naked eye. The breeze brushed by, but it couldn't even bring a little bit of dust because all the dust has been stuck by the sticky blood. In the battlefield, there are obviously 2 groups of people. One group of people is dressed differently. The only thing they have in common is that they all wear a forehead protector with the word ninja written on it. The other group of people is neatly wearing white brocade robes with red embroidery patterns on the brocade robes to indicate the identity of this person. Watergate and Nangonja were facing each other. Neither of them spoke, but they looked at each other silently. The 2 of them were not only looking at each other, but also counting the strength of each other's camp with the corner of their eyes. In Nangonja's camp, including Uchiha Sasuke, for 5 elements altar lords in addition to sharp metal altar, 120 elite members, and about 1,500 blood cloth pavilion disciples, stood behind Nangonja. In the Ninja Allied Forces camp, there are Watergate, Tsurumi Mei, Gaara, and the 3 Woodleaf Sannin Jiraiya, Orochimaru, and Tsunade, Uzumaki Naruto, and the remaining 2,000 ninjas of each ninja village. Relatively speaking, the number of the Blood Cloak Pavilion was smaller than the joint army composed of the 5 major ninja villages, But after all, the Blood Cloak Pavilion itself participated in the battle in the middle stage. The elite team of 120 people was directly hidden by Xianxia in the Lion Clan space to preserve their strength. The ninja allied forces have been in a high-intensity battle since the beginning, and they have been tired to a point, and their combat power has also declined. Chapter 739. Although there was a certain gap in numbers, for various reasons, the ninja allied forces formed by the Blood Cloak Pavilion and the 5 major ninja villages had reached a stalemate. On the ninja allied forces side, there were several Kage-level powerhouses, but these powerhouses were all injured. On the other hand, the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion were not injured. Using the 4-5 elements altar lords, who were comparable to Kage-level powerhouses, to resist the Sannin and the other 3 Kages, they could barely do it with the help of the Blood Cloak Pavilion's combined attack formation. As long as the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion could defeat the allied forces led by Watergate and Naruto under the leadership of Xianxia and Sasuke, then the Blood Cloak Pavilion would be able to reverse its status in the ninja world and become the world's mainstream existence. Although the current battlefield seemed to be a war started by Xianxia and Watergate, in fact, everything was no longer under the control of Xianxia and Watergate. Now, the problem between the internal cultivators and the ninjas was actually the problem between the classes. Ninjas occupied a large amount of wealth and cultivation resources in the ninja world, while the internal cultivators had power, but they didn't get a share of the benefits generated by the ninja world. Whether it was a ninja or an internal cultivator, the progress of their strength required money and resources. Now, in fact, everyone was protecting their own path and that of their juniors. There was no right or wrong, but they vowed not to give up. Kill! Looking at the ninja allied forces ninjas, Xianxia finally gave the order to attack. Unless an inner force cultivator was able to cultivate sword chi, their attack range was relatively small. Basically, the range of an inner force cultivator's attack was determined by how far their weapon could attack. This was an innate disadvantage of internal cultivators, so when an internal cultivator faced a ninja, the first thing to do was to close the distance between himself and the ninja. With Xianxia's order, the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion also took out their respective weapons and rushed directly toward the ninja allied forces' location. Although the ninja allied forces have been exhausted due to the previous battles, they have not lost their fighting ability. Seeing the disciples of the blood-robed pavilion rushing towards them, the ninjutsu-type ninjas in the ninja allied forces also joined together to cast ninjutsu. Earth Escape, Earth Wall. After seeing the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion rushing towards their side, the ninjutsu of the ninja allied forces reacted quickly. The Earth Release ninjas used their signature Earth Release ninjutsu, Earth Wall, to block the Blood Cloth Pavilion. After the previous battle, the ninjas from different ninja villages in the ninja allied forces also have a certain degree of tacit understanding at this moment. The earthen walls that these ninjas jointly cast weren't mechanically arranged in a row, but they were distributed in a disorderly manner between each other. The earthen walls together formed a maze-like blocking fortification. With these fortifications, they can completely block the charge of the Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples and divide the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion to a certain extent, giving the ninja allied forces an opportunity to defeat the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion one by one. Seeing such a maze formed by earthen walls appearing in front of their route, the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Xianxia, and Sasuke naturally knew that as long as they want to win, they must not rush into such a maze-like fortification according to the layout of the ninja allied forces and be defeated one by one. The 4-5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, Hutu, Aoki, Bishui, and Akame, rushed out of the Blood Cloak Pavilion camp. Each of them had different natures of internal strength, directly accumulating in the weapons in their hands. At this moment, the 4-5 elements altar lords were the sharpest sword of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, rushing towards the fortifications built by the ninja allied forces. Although Earthen Wall itself was a ninjutsu with good defensive power, in the face of the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, earthen wall's defensive power alone was not enough to stop them. Crutches, whips, katanas, and boxing gloves, for weapons with different styles, each showing the light of the 4 attributes of earth, wood, water, and fire. The thick earthen wall was not much different from paper in front of the 4 people. When the attacks hit the earthen wall was directly broken. Looking at the earthen wall being broken, the ninja allied forces did not show the slightest sign of panic. Ninja itself was a profession born for combat, and during combat, it was also the most suitable state for ninja. Although the earthen wall's best effect was naturally to divide the internal force cultivators of the Blood Cloak Pavilion and give the ninja allied forces a chance to break through one by one, it was now relying on such a ninjutsu to stop the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples from attacking, giving the ninja allied forces time to observe and react. In fact, it was not a total loss. The Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples directly rushed in like a hot knife through butter. Although it did not affect the ninja allied forces' morale, the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples' morale directly became higher and higher under the leadership of the 4-5 elements altar lords at this moment. War itself was a kind of competition between people's momentum. The side with high morale would definitely exert more power than the side with low morale or ordinary morale. In order to suppress the Blood Cloak Pavilion's disciples' morale, the ninja allied forces could not sit still and wait for death. Woodleaf Village's legendary Senin also directly joined the battle. Before the battle, Xianxia had already analyzed the 4-5 elements altar lord's general level of strength in the ninja allied forces, and he had specified a policy for the 4-5 elements altar lords to contain at least 6 Kage-level ninjas. Now that they saw the Sannin directly joining the battle, the 4-5 elements altar lords were not afraid at all and directly greeted them. Among the Sannin, Jiraiya had suffered a certain amount of injuries because of the previous battle. His current physical state could not even enter Sage mode, and he could only exert 40 to 50% of his strength at most. Tsunade herself was a ninja who mainly used taijutsu as a means of attack. In the face of the exquisite moves of the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, her powerful monster strength could not exert its due power. Needless to say, Orochimaru had positioned himself in the position of an observer. Now, in the battle with the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion, he was basically in a state of inaction. Due to various reasons, the Sannin were directly suppressed in a disadvantageous position in the battle against the 4-5 elements altar lords. Chapter 740. Even the 4-5 elements altar lords didn't expect that such a battle would go so smoothly. The famous Sannin in the shinobi world, whether it's Orochimaru, Jiraiya, or Tsunade, at this moment, they were directly suppressed by the 5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloak Pavilion. Such a situation naturally made the disciples of the Blood Cloak Pavilion very excited. It turned out that the Blood Cloak Pavilion was not inferior to these famous forces in the shinobi world. Seeing that the situation was favorable to his side, Xianxia immediately struck while the iron was hot. He raised the Heaven's Disaster Sword in his hand high and said to the many disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion behind him, "Fellow disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, we have been lurking in the ninja world for who knows how many years. Over the years, we have endured hardships and endured humiliation. For what? The purpose of this was to allow inner force cultivators to walk openly in front of everyone, to be respected and respected by others. Not to be ridiculed, saying that we internal strength cultivators are inferior to these ninjas." Xianxia's tone was a bit painful, and the slightly heavy tone directly triggered the grievances in the hearts of the disciples of the Blood Cloth Pavilion when they were still not famous and were looked down upon by others. Immediately afterward, Xianxia directly pointed the tip of the Heaven's Disaster Sword at Jiraiya, Tsunade, and Orochimaru, who were fighting with the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Blood Cloth Pavilion, and then said to everyone, "But now let's take a look. The Sannin, who are known as the legends of the ninja world, are still suppressed by us internal strength cultivators. Are the ninjas really stronger than us? Now the facts have brought the answer to this question. That is, we internal strength cultivators do not lose to anyone. In this battle, we can only win, not lose. Hearing Nangong's words, the disciples of the Bloodcloth Pavilion were also full of fighting spirit. We can only win, not lose. Let those short-sighted people in the ninja world understand that we internal strength cultivators are not weak. The disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion responded to Nangong's words and raised the weapons in their hands. Their eyes were filled with ferocious glints as if they were ferocious beasts that had broken out of a cage. Seeing the Sannin being suppressed by the 4-5 elements altar lords, Watergate and the other 3 Kages became anxious. The gap in combat power is not big, but there is a huge gap in morale. If this continues, the ninja allied forces may really lose. The winner was king, and the loser was a bandit. This was an eternal truth. Once the Bloodcloak Pavilion really defeats the ninja allied forces formed by the 5 great ninja villages, then there is no doubt that the Bloodcloak Pavilion, as the gathering place of internal force cultivators, will become the core of the ninja world's power. Maybe even the name of the shinobi world will change. Every person who could occupy a high position would naturally have an indescribable sense of responsibility. And a very important part of this sense of responsibility is the protection of the inheritance. Ninja is a profession that has lasted for thousands of years. Although there have been ups and downs and there are times when it is suppressed, but in the end, it will become the mainstream of the ninja world. But now standing in front of everyone, the Bloodcloak Pavilion is a profession with potential no less than the ninja. Once such a profession once again occupies the position of ninja in the ninja world, with the support of Nangongja, a rare dual genius of internal force and kendo in the world, it is enough to twist the internal force cultivators into a rope and gain a firm foothold in the ninja world. With the political talent that Nangongja has shown over the years and the layout of the Bloodcloak Pavilion in the ninja world, even if they don't directly encompass the entire ninja world in their hands, at least they can directly seize half of the ninja world and compete with the 5 great ninja villages. Such a situation will naturally greatly limit the development of ninja, and there will be one more big enemy for no reason. For ninja, it is already a matter of inheritance. Out of their responsibility and obligation, Terumi Mei, Gaara, and A also directly stood up and rushed in the direction of the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. But after all, in the previous battle, the 3 Kage have more or less suffered a certain degree of injury, and their strength can't be fully exerted. And although Terumi Mei, Gaara, and A are strong, there are certain problems in their cooperation with the Sannin. Orochimaru, Jiraiya, and Tsunade, the 3 famous Sannin of the ninja world, naturally have an extremely exquisite cooperation between them, but when the 3 Kage also join the battle, even if their own combat awareness is excellent, it will affect the cooperation of the 3 Sannin to a certain extent. Although the 3 Kage joined, in fact, their combat power didn't soar to the limit, and it was still within the range of the 4-5 elements altar lords of the Bloodcloak Pavilion. The 6 Kage-level ninjas can't exert their strength to the extreme because of physical reasons, or because of personal reasons, they are maliciously holding back. Under this situation, they actually fought back and forth with the 4-5 elements altar lords, exchanging attack and defense, which looked very lively. The 4-5 elements altar lords of the Bloodcloak Pavilion and the 6 Kage-level ninjas of the ninja allied forces were fighting in a group at this moment, directly restraining each other, and there was no way to estimate the battle between the 2 armies on the battlefield. The ninjas of the ninja allied forces and the disciples of the Bloodcloak Pavilion also directly collided with each other under the leadership of Nangongja and Watergate. Soldier against soldier, general against general, Nangongja directly fought with Watergate. Sasuke and Naruto also directly collided with each other. Sasuke and Naruto constantly fought back and forth, but it was obvious that during the battle, Sasuke had been constantly attacking, and Naruto used various means to resolve Sasuke's attacks. It seemed that he had no desire to fight. While Naruto continued to resolve Sasuke's attacks, he also led Sasuke to the periphery of the battlefield. Not long ago, Sasuke and Naruto used their means to seal Otsutsuki Kagaya. Although he and Naruto didn't have the 6 paths of yin and yang power in their bodies, their life level was far beyond the average ninja and internal force cultivator. Only he could contain Naruto, so Sasuke didn't directly follow Naruto and left the center of the battlefield bit by bit. He wanted to see what Naruto wanted to do. However, Sasuke himself was also a person with a strong character. Even if Naruto said something, it was likely that the two would still solve the problem between them by force. Chapter 741. Naruto took Sasuke away from the battlefield step by step while constantly defending against Sasuke's attacks. When Naruto and Sasuke were both out of the battlefield and some distance away from the battlefield, Naruto finally stopped his passive defense and began to take the initiative to attack Sasuke. When sealing Otsutsuki Kagaya before, although it seems that only the 6 paths of yin and yang power in Sasuke and Naruto's body were consumed, Sasuke and Naruto's physical strength and chakra also consumed a lot in order to activate the 6 paths of yin and yang power. Naturally, such consumption is not a serious problem when dealing with people who are weaker than themselves, but when Sasuke and Naruto, two people with similar strength, start to fight, the battle situation is extremely dragging. In order to give themselves a chance to win, Naruto and Sasuke used taijutsu most in the battle. Originally, Naruto was blindly defending, and Sasuke kept attacking. But suddenly, Naruto was no longer willing to defend, and directly faced Sasuke's attack and punched towards Sasuke's body. Although it didn't catch Sasuke off guard, it still made Sasuke hesitate. The two are equal in strength, and a little mistake will cause one side to fall directly into a disadvantage. Naruto took advantage of Sasuke's hesitation and directly launched a fierce attack. Naruto was not only passively defending just now, but he has been observing Sasuke's state in defense. He comprehensively analyzed Sasuke's body and chakra at this moment, and accumulated his strength to directly take down Sasuke in front of him so that he can listen to him. For Sasuke, his close friend and rival, Naruto knew him better than anyone else. For Naruto, Xianxia was just an uncle who watched him grow up and took care of his family, but for Sasuke, Xianxia was a close teacher and father. Naruto didn't know that Xianxia saved Sasuke's family, but it was enough to see how much Sasuke respected Xianxia from Sasuke's eyes. If he didn't directly control Sasuke, then Sasuke would definitely not listen to him. Naruto faced Sasuke's attack and punched Sasuke directly. A large number of Senjutsu chakra and Bijutsu chakra were released from Naruto's body, and under Naruto's control, they formed a chakra rope, directly wrapping Sasuke in it. One step ahead, one step ahead. Naruto relied on his own attack and decisiveness to directly control Sasuke at this moment. But after all, both Naruto and Sasuke were greatly exhausted because of the previous battle. Their physical strength and chakra were actually not enough to support a long battle between the two. At this moment, the rope formed by Bijutsu chakra and Senjutsu chakra on Sasuke's body was actually very fragile. Even if Sasuke didn't break free, it wouldn't take long for such a blockade to disappear directly. Sasuke, believe me, although we are not in the same camp now, I have no malicious intentions towards you and me. The reason why I forcibly bound you here now is to have a few words with you. In order to form such a rope, I have overdrawn a lot of chakra and physical strength, and I have no ability to attack you. So, Sasuke, can you give me a few minutes to finish what I want to say? Naruto looked at Sasuke, and the mental and physical exhaustion was directly revealed through his eyes. From Sasuke's position, there was no need to listen to Naruto's words here. Although the chakra rope on his body was tough, it was not completely unsolvable for Sasuke. But when looking at Naruto's eyes, Sasuke's heart was still shaken. Even if he could now simulate the power of chakra in his body into sword chi with the help of 6 Tomo Rinnegan, and cut the chakra rope on his body with the sharp attribute of sword chi, Sasuke still stood quietly in the same place, looking at Naruto, giving Naruto a chance to say what he wanted to say. With Sasuke's acquiescence, Naruto adjusted his body slightly so that his body could stand in front of Sasuke. He said to Sasuke with a sad and dignified tone, "I'm sorry, Sasuke. Sasuke, you and I have known each other for more than 10 years. Although you usually don't smile and most of the time you are cold like ice, but I understand your inner loneliness, and helplessness. We haven't been together much over the years, and we have experienced all kinds of things. Over the years, because of missions or some other things, I have seen more and more the dark side of the ninja world. Endless killing, human beings swallowed by desire, all of this is so dazzling and difficult to eliminate. This war seems to be a battle for the future of the ninja world, but isn't it also using the hands of Uchiha Obito, Uchiha Madara, and even Otsutsuki Kagaya to retwist everyone in the ninja world into a rope, so that people have more trust in each other, and give the ninja world a better possibility? Listening to Naruto's words, Sasuke's heart couldn't help but agree with him. How did the fetters come about? Perhaps because of some personal similarities in personality, people will have a good impression of each other, but only when they face things over and over again and solve them together, people will truly begin to understand and recognize each other. This shinobi world war forced the 5 great shinobi villages, which had deep contradictions before, to be glued together, so that ninjas belonging to different shinobi villages will face the threat of their own death at the same time and face the challenge of death together. Just from the close cooperation between different ninjas of the major ninja villages on the battlefield just now, it can be seen that the ninjas of the 5 major ninja villages have actually begun to understand each other. As long as there is a good beginning of mutual understanding, there is a possibility of peace. For Naruto, the current situation is the best beginning to achieve peace. As long as it can be managed well, then it can bring peace to the ninja world. As long as the Blood Robe Pavilion can stop, then there will be no more bloodshed in the ninja world, and people will understand each other and build a perfect world. Sasuke, don't be obsessed with starting a war. As long as each of us understands each other, peace will eventually come. Chapter 742. Peace. Listening to Naruto's painstaking efforts to describe the vision of peace in front of him, Sasuke's eyes didn't have the recognition that Naruto imagined. Instead, he looked at Naruto's face with a bit of sarcasm. Naruto, I know what you mean. You now think that the 5 great shinobi villages have gone through such an experience of joining forces against a strong enemy, so that the 5 great shinobi villages have the possibility to live in harmony with each other to a certain extent, and the 5 great shinobi villages have the possibility to live in harmony with each other. And as long as the possibility of living in peace can be managed well, the ninja world will usher in peace, right? Sasuke did not understand Naruto's pursuit. On the contrary, Sasuke understood Naruto's pursuit very well in his heart. But understanding was one thing, and acknowledging it was another. We thought that Naruto was a wise man, but we didn't expect you to be so stupid. Sasuke didn't wait for Naruto to answer his question. Instead, he directly scolded Naruto. Relying on the mutual understanding between people to win peace for the ninja world? Indeed, this way can indeed bring peace, but how long can this peace last? I don't know if you have ever thought about this question, Naruto. The desire for mutual understanding brought about by fighting can last for 1, 2, or even 3 generations, but can it last for 5, 6, or even more? Although the feelings between people are very strong and powerful, such feelings can never withstand the erosion of time. The influence of emotions will weaken from generation to generation, and one day, peace will still dissipate. People will still fight each other for their own interests. Is such a temporary peace the peace you want, Naruto? Sasuke and Naruto's starting points are different. After all, Naruto is a ninja who grew up in Woodleaf. Although he has seen a lot of darkness hidden in Woodleaf in the process of growing up, Naruto still has to protect the interests of Woodleaf as a rule of his own from the perspective of Naruto's identity, status, and family environment. He didn't want to kill too much, and he didn't want to harm the interests of Woodleaf itself. Based on his own position and mode of thinking, Naruto can only draw such a view that the 5 major ninja villages understand each other and then bring peace. But Sasuke is different. Although Sasuke and Naruto are both ninjas from Woodleaf, Sasuke's own family was directly destroyed because of the darkness hidden in Woodleaf. In other words, Sasuke himself doesn't have a so-called good impression of Woodleaf. Now Sasuke has directly joined the camp of Blood Cloak Pavilion, which is opposed to the 5 major ninja villages. Such a change in psychological position also gives Sasuke a different way to think about problems. Why is there endless fighting in the ninja world? And the scale of the ninja world war is bigger than the previous one, and the impact is more far-reaching than the previous one. In the final analysis, it's the unequal distribution of resources and the strong aggressiveness of ninja itself. A person with a weapon in his hand and seeing a weakling who looks very rich in front of him, as long as it's a creature's instinct of survival of the fittest, it will definitely attack this person out of desperation. And ninja itself is the most unruly person in the ninja world. As long as it's to achieve their own goals, there's almost nothing they can't do, such as poisoning, assassination, and trickery. A large number of such people who are unscrupulous and have weapons in their hands will naturally lead to continuous fighting. And the way Sasuke can think of is actually very simple. Since he can't change a person's nature, then he can at least take away the weapons in their hands with his own ability, so that they can only have inflated ambitions, but not the ability to put their ambitions into practice. Sasuke is indeed loyal to Xianxia, but Sasuke's purpose is not to let Blood Cloak Pavilion unify the ninja world, but to let Blood Cloak Pavilion be the existence of depriving ninjas of weapons in their hands, so that the people who have the power in the ninja world will belong to the same force, directly reducing the possibility of internal friction in the ninja world. Then Sasuke will help Xianxia to formulate strict laws that restrict both civilians and internal force cultivators, so that everything can be governed by laws and prohibitions, instead of relying purely on moral constraints between people. This is the way Sasuke thinks can really bring peace to the ninja world. Although it seems a bit too overbearing and not benevolent enough, the ninja world is in a chaotic world, and in a chaotic world, heavy laws should be used. The existence of ninjas is the fundamental factor that really brings war to the ninja world. Unify the ninja world, manage all the people with power, so that they can't act wantonly. As long as they violate the code, they will be punished directly. The way of benevolence and righteousness may sound very good, but the way of hegemony is the way to achieve great things. After listening to Sasuke's way of pursuing peace, Naruto's heart couldn't help but feel a little bit of fear. Naruto himself also knew that this way of Sasuke's will indeed bring peace to the ninja world. But such peace is accompanied by the destruction of the original situation of the ninja world and a lot of bloody killings. If Sasuke's strategy is successfully implemented, then the population of the ninja world will be reduced by at least 40%. Not to say that corpses will be everywhere, but it can also be said that blood will be flowing. Sasuke, I will definitely stop you. The path you have chosen now will not only hurt yourself, but also hurt countless people. If you really walk on such a path, then you won't be a human anymore. You're walking on a path that only evil spirits would walk on. Naruto even knew how terrible Sasuke's choice was. Originally, what Naruto wanted to do was to persuade Sasuke to stand on the same side as himself, so that Xianxia won't lead the Blood Cloak Pavilion to start a war. But now it seems that although Xianxia is dangerous, Xianxia has a limit after all, and Uchiha Sasuke, who is standing in front of him, has completely broken the shackles on his heart and directly began to choose the most dangerous path to bring peace to the ninja world. Evil spirits? So what if I become an evil spirit? This world is really disappointing. If becoming an evil spirit can change the world, then the price is too cheap. Isn't it worth a try? Chapter 743. Both Naruto and Sasuke are kind people. It is precisely because of the kindness in their hearts that Naruto and Sasuke will tirelessly pursue the so-called peace. But there is also a distinction between kindness. Naruto's kindness is equal kindness. As long as someone stands in front of him and needs help, Naruto will pass on his kindness to the other party. But Sasuke's kindness is not like this. Sasuke's kindness will only be given to those who he thinks are worthy of kindness as a gift. In other words, it is conditional kindness. Between Naruto and Sasuke's kindness, who is better and who is worse, no one can give a correct answer. However, Naruto and Sasuke's different attitudes towards kindness also make Naruto and Sasuke may have different choices when facing problems. Just like now, Naruto chose to coexist to bring peace to the ninja world. Sasuke chose to conquer and rule of law to achieve peace. The path chosen by Uzumaki Naruto is like the path of the Holy Mother. He believes in the possibility in everyone's heart. He believes that as long as the right opportunity is created, then peace will definitely come to the world when everyone understands each other. The path chosen by Uchiha Sasuke is more like the path of evil spirits. He sees all the bad habits in everyone's heart in his own eyes and formulates corresponding, strong and effective laws and regulations to restrain the bad habits in people's hearts. However, the ninja world itself is a situation of fragmentation. Although it is difficult for people to understand each other, it is still possible through some opportunities. But Sasuke's plan to almost break all the old patterns and build a new world is undoubtedly a declaration of war on the whole world. Fortunately, there is such a powerful blood cloak pavilion in the ninja world. Otherwise, if Sasuke wants to realize his plan, his hands will be stained with more killing. Naruto saw that Sasuke's plan may have a negative impact on Sasuke himself and the whole world. Naruto, who was still holding back, had no intention of going easy at this moment. He forcibly stimulated the remaining Senjutsu chakra and chakra in his body and directly attacked Sasuke. On the main battlefield, the disciples of Blood Cloak Pavilion and the ninjas of the Ninja Allied Forces were also fighting at this moment. As the battle continued, both the Blood Cloak Pavilion and the Ninja Allied Forces suffered a large number of casualties. A large number of Blood Cloak Pavilion disciples and ninjas of the 5 major ninja villages couldn't fight because of serious injuries or deaths. However, the large number of casualties did not make Xianxia and Watergate have any intention of retreating. On the contrary, they became braver as the more they fought, the more they fought, the more they fought, the braver they looked. In the beginning, Minato and Xianxia didn't hold back at all. They directly displayed their most powerful strength. In an instant, the battlefield was almost filled with sword energy and golden light. But after all, Xianxia and Watergate had a lot of energy during the battle with Xianxia and Watergate. Such a high-intensity battle didn't last long. In fact, from the beginning, the two could have directly used such a method to determine the outcome of the battle by relying on skills and wisdom, but after all, the war wasn't a battle between two people. In order to boost the morale of their respective camps and make the people in their camps full of fighting spirit, Xianxia and Watergate used such a seemingly unwise method of attack that consumed a lot of energy. But the battle continued until now, whether it was the disciples of Blood Cloak Pavilion or the ninjas of the 5 major ninja villages, the blood in their hearts has been stimulated. There was no longer a need for Watergate and Xianxia to use such a laborious method to establish the will to fight in their hearts. Watergate and Xianxia naturally returned to such a low-consumption battle mode, where they were always ready to find the opponent's loopholes to attack. Xianxia, it's time for you to stop your crazy actions, right? Previously, you said that you didn't believe that the 5 major ninja villages would be willing to share the cake in your mouth with the Blood Cloak Pavilion, so you insisted on competing with the Ninja Allied Forces formed by the 5 major ninja villages to show your muscles. But Xianxia, please look at the current battlefield. Whether it is the Ninja Allied Forces or the Blood Cloak Pavilion, there are a lot of casualties at the moment. If this continues, it won't be about showing your muscles to fight for enough benefits for yourself, but it will be about the Blood Cloak Pavilion and the 5 major ninja villages fighting to the death. Is this the result that you want, Xianxia? To be honest, Watergate's heart has become anxious now. After all, at this moment, a large number of ninjas are being killed in front of him. Ninjas are not warriors. Ninjas don't need the glory of pioneering new territories. Ninjas only need the benefits in front of them. So before the start of this battle, Watergate deliberately left some Woodleaf ninjas to stay in the Woodleaf village, and crown these ninjas with an irrefutable reason, to protect the daimyo. To be honest, although the daimyo of the 5 major ninja villages were not useless, they were almost not far away. Most of the time, they were like wage earners, succumbing to the violent mechanisms of the 5 major ninja villages and managing the affairs of the entire country in exchange for their own comfort and luxury. Although the kage of the 5 major ninja villages didn't think highly of the daimyo of their country, after all, in name, the 5 major ninja villages still belonged to the 5 daimyo. No matter what, the 5 major ninja villages must find ways to protect the daimyo of their country. Now that the 5 daimyo are hiding in the Land of Fire, in order to ensure the safety of the 5 daimyo, naturally, the nearest wood-leaf village of the Land of Fire will provide shelter for the 5 daimyo. In this way, Watergate naturally obtained a legitimate reason to preserve the strength of Woodleaf Village. Preserving a part of the strength of his own ninja village will undoubtedly make Woodleaf Village the #1 ninja village in the ninja world after the battle. Minato has already made plans after the battle. With Konoha's strength far beyond the other villages, Minato will try his best to maintain the relationship between the 5 Great Shinobi Village Alliance, making Konoha the leader of the 5 Great Shinobi Village Alliance, and making Konoha the leader of the 5 Great Shinobi Village Alliance. Now, Watergate will never allow Nangongjia to destroy his plan. After all, if Nangongjia continues like this, it is very likely that he will directly kill all the ninjas of the 5 major ninja villages. At that time, although the 5 major ninja villages will no longer be a hindrance, but without the restraint of the major ninja villages, there will be chaos everywhere, and it will be more troublesome. You're tuning in to the Wandering Hero YouTube channel. Don't forget to subscribe and join us on this journey to catch the most captivating stories.